Chapter 672. Those Snow Clan people, since you want to let them go, we can let them go. Gong Dai suddenly relented. Although he hated the Snow Clan, he was not the old Gong Dai. If the Snow Clan dared to cause trouble again, he had absolute confidence that he would be able to protect the little one in his arms and destroy them. The reason why he wanted to kill them was to prevent future troubles and save himself some trouble. But now, he was clearly more interested in another matter. Seeing that Gong Dai had relented, even though she felt the danger, Gong Yimo was still happy. She felt as if a large stone had been lifted from her heart. However, the other party's next sentence caused her nerves to tense up again. As long as Royal Sister can tell me, this chain. How did it end up in your hands? This. Could she not answer? Gong Yimo put her hands behind her back. She really was not a perverted woman. She really did not deliberately run off after sleeping with him. She was the victim. She was also innocent. She slowly lowered her head, like a troublemaker who had done something wrong. She could not think of an answer for a long time. This. That, I also don't know how it ended up in my hands. I don't remember. Right. She had lost her memories. Gong Dai could not help but want to laugh. His cold and handsome face instantly lit up. In this ambiguous and dangerous atmosphere, there was actually a bit of a demon. He hugged his little wife and said softly, "Then let me help you remember." Who wants to remember this? Gong Yimo wanted to escape, but she was held tightly. She really wanted to cover her ears and say, "I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it." Gong Dai smiled as he looked at her terrified expression. He lowered his head and licked her face. As expected, it was as sweet as always. "Why are you licking me? Are you a dog?" Gong Dai chuckled. "I'm just licking. It's better than someone who did such a thing to me and then left irresponsibly. She made me think that. It was just a wet dream." Gong Yimo was terrified again. She lowered her big bright eyes, not daring to look at him. Maybe it was just a dream. She didn't sound confident at all. Yes. In your dreams. Whenever Gong Dai thought of that time, when he couldn't even be sure if she was alive or dead, when he missed her and hated himself so much that he couldn't sleep, he wished he could melt this heartless little thing into his body. Let's see if she could still leave him. Moreover, she actually dared to forget about him. Gong Dai suddenly stopped smiling and said through gritted teeth, "I was dreaming. I dreamed that a little vixen came to my bed to seduce me. After I pressed her under my body and did whatever she wanted, she didn't forget to steal my necklace before she ran away." Gong Yimo looked at the chain wrapped around her hand and said subconsciously, "This is mine." How could such an exquisite compass exist in this era? The moment she said that, Gong Yimo was stunned. In a daze, she seemed to see a girl and a boy sitting by the river. They were holding candied haws and making a wish. Then, she personally hung the necklace around Gong Dai's neck. Suddenly, the world turned upside down. She was being pressed down by a hot male body. Both her legs were wrapped around his waist. Wasn't this position too embarrassing? Gong Yimo didn't dare to move. If she did, it would be more exciting. She could only say that aggrievedly. What are you doing? If you want to talk, just talk. The doctor said that we can't have sex. Last time. He made her suffer for a long time." Gong Yimo braked too quickly and almost bit her own tongue. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows and looked down at her. "So, you admit that last time, you slept with me?" Gong Yimo covered her face. Could he not be so embarrassing? Moreover, what did he mean by she slept with him? He was the one who forced himself on her, it was clearly you. You did something overboard to me. You almost hurt the baby. At the mention of the baby, Gong Yimo was instantly filled with confidence. Gong Dai was stunned and his attitude softened. Yes, the baby. They still had a baby. Gong Dai touched her stomach with an almost pious attitude and finally said stiffly, "Is he all right?" Seeing that his attitude had softened, Gong Yimo instantly became more aggressive. How could he be all right? That time. After that, I was in pain for many days. When Gong Dai heard that, although his face was cold, his heart ached. If only he hadn't drunk that day. He definitely wouldn't have hurt her and the baby. Seeing that he seemed a little guilty, Gong Yimo struck while the iron was hot. She hurriedly covered her face and said bitterly, "Because of that time, my stomach often hurts and I can't have sex at all." "You even bullied me," Gong Dai sighed. His royal sister was lying again. Last time. Although he was drunk, he let her go immediately when he heard that she had a stomach ache. This girl actually wanted to use this to manipulate him. Did she think that she could avoid a disaster like this? Gong Dai pressed down on her, took off her hairpin, and let go of her hair. Seeing that complaining was useless, he moved closer to her. Gong Yimo wanted to run away, but he stopped her from moving. Based on his actions, it was obvious that he was going to spoil things. "What are you doing?" Gong Dai's fingers slowly penetrated her hair and played with it. "Didn't royal sister say that I bullied you?" His gaze was calm. "I can't bear the infamy for nothing." Gong Yimo was shocked. He was finally going to eat her up. "Calm down. Calm down." He didn't go on her directly. It seemed that there was still room for negotiation. "No. You didn't bully me." When Gong Dai heard that, he placed his elbow above her and chuckled. "Then last time. Didn't you say that I hurt you? This is bullying." His low and hoarse voice tickled her nerves bit by bit. He even used the ends of her hair to tickle her ear with malice. Gong Yimo shrank back. She was like a piece of meat on a chopping board, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. She wanted to cry but had no tears. No, it didn't hurt that much. After all, he stopped midway. "Oh." Gong Dai lowered his head and kissed her face. He said sadly, "But what should I do? I think I'm hurt." Gong Yimo stared at him with her eyes wide open. Could it be that he had gone crazy from not being able to satisfy his desires? At this moment, she didn't even care that Gong Dai was kissing her whenever he wanted. "Where are you hurt?" Gong Dai let go of her hair and held her hand, pressing it against his chest. Gong Yimo was shocked and wanted to withdraw her hand. However, Gong Dai held her down forcefully. Gong Yimo looked up and saw that he was smiling. However, she didn't know when those ink-black eyes of his were tainted with a tinge of misery. She was stunned. Why would someone as powerful as him have such a gaze? "My feelings are hurt." Gong Dai forced a smile and looked at her deeply, as though he wanted to imprint her in the depths of his soul. "Sometimes, I really want to ask myself why I love you so much. But when I ask myself this question, I realize that other than loving you more and loving you to the core, I have no other choice." Chapter 673. Gong Yimo's heart was thumping because of his elegant voice and his eyes. The eyes would not lie. That cold appearance would be infected with misery, desire, eagerness, and grief for her. She suddenly felt that she really could not help but love this man. "I'm sorry." Gong Yimo sincerely apologized. "I didn't mean to forget you." Perhaps this was the reason why his feelings were hurt. Gong Dai's face was bitter, and then he smiled. It's okay, you won't have the chance to forget me again. He reached out and lifted her chin, kissing her deeply. I'm sorry, I only found you now. Gong Yimo was a little moved. When she thought of the man she liked, looking for her everywhere, her heart softened. You've been looking for me for a long time. I didn't mean to hide from you, I just misunderstood. Gong Ju gently nibbled on her lips. Seeing her bright eyes blurred because of him, he was very satisfied. It's all in the past. When he was looking for her, he had thought of countless possibilities. Countless terrifying thoughts filled his mind. He had thought about what would happen if she never appeared again. Would he go mad and destroy the world, or would he continue to live like a walking corpse? He did not dare to think too deeply. He could only keep looking. He could not sleep because his dreams were full of her blood-stained appearance. Because the two of them were very close, Gong Yimo could clearly see the fear in his eyes that could not be dispersed. She did not expect that the powerful regent would also have a time when he was afraid. All of this was because of her. Gong Yimo's heart was thumping. She could not help but bite his lips back. She also gently bit him. This kind of ambiguous nibbling made that pair of cold eyes be once again occupied by desire. Gong Yimo was a little proud. Such an outstanding man was very interested in her. Seeing the other party pick up her clothes, she did not stop him because she felt that she longed for him. Just as Gong Dai took off the last layer of his clothes, Gong Yimo admired his figure and said somewhat embarrassedly. Actually, even if she loses her memory and forgets about you, you don't have to worry. Gong Dai's clothes were half torn, and his demonic silver hair hung down. When he heard her words, he looked at her. She suddenly had only one thought, and that was to eat him. Pounce! Swallowing hard, Gong Yimo got up and hugged his neck with a sinister smile. Because the first time I saw you, I was mesmerized by you. Every time you kissed me, I wanted you to kiss me a few more times. Even if I refused on the surface, but my heart was beating so fast. Ah! Gong Yimo let out a cry of surprise and was pushed down by Gong Dai. He took off her clothes and rushed in. The intertwining of their bodies made the two of them sigh in satisfaction. Gong Yimo pointed at the chain on her wrist and took it off. Don't move first. This ring is a pair with the one on your hand, right? Gong Dai held back his pleasure and bit her nose. Yes, my baby is the smartest. Gong Yimo suppressed the soreness and pain and coaxed him coquettishly. Then you'll put it on for me. The black ring was glowing. She had once said that she liked a stone called Jo. It was black like jade and had the luster of jade and the toughness of stone. Therefore, Gong Dai used Jo to make the ring. Their bodies were connected. Gong Dai not only felt satisfied physically by putting the ring on for her, but his heart was also filled with happiness. He put the ring on Gong Yimo's white and tender ring finger, bowed his head and kissed it. Then, he clasped her hand and pressed it against the bed. The two identical rings intertwined and collided, just like their masters. They kissed and entangled together like snakes. Do you love me? Between kisses, Gong Yimo gasped for breath and asked. I love you. Gong Dai answered her in a hoarse voice. I only love you. Then what about the baby? Gong Yimo's remaining rationality made her want to make things difficult for him. Only love her and not the baby. I'll be very gentle, what? Gong Yimo hammered Gong Dai. After that, there was no other sound except for gasping for breath. The outside was covered with happy characters. It was noon. Inside, the bridal chamber had already begun. Shuai Lian and Fuya waited for an entire afternoon. Then, Shuai Lian couldn't sit still. She got up with a fiery temper. I'm going to stop him. So what if he's the regent? Mo is pregnant. What time is it now? He doesn't know how to control himself. Although she said that, her cheeks couldn't help but blush. What was going on? She was confused. Fuya couldn't help but pull her and say with a smile. This is a good thing. Men will only be obedient when they are satisfied in bed. Don't you want Mo to succeed in pleading for leniency? But Shuel Yen's face was full of embarrassment. But today is Mo's wedding day. Not only did he steal the bride, he didn't care about Mo's body and did that kind of thing. Fuya hugged his wife in his arms. Don't worry, the regent will be careful. I can see that he cares a lot about Mo. Saying that, he smirked and kissed his wife. Or does my wife also want it? Bah! Shuel Yen couldn't help but hammered this old pervert. Her face turned even redder. She was lucky. After faking her death and escaping, Shuel Yen still wanted to pester her. Fortunately, there was this man who always protected her. How could she meet a man who loved her so much in the end? Fuya knew that Shuel Yen was shy, so he didn't tease her. He touched his stomach and said pitifully, "Wife, let's quickly eat. I didn't eat lunch because I was worried about Mo, so your husband is about to starve to death. Then how about we call them to eat together?" Shuel Yen still wanted to separate the two of them. Fuya revealed a gentle smile. Love fills one's stomach and they are still newlyweds. We don't want to be bad people who break up a pair of lovebirds. Even if they wanted to break up a pair of lovebirds, they had to see if the regent would agree. Shuel Yen finally gave up, then I'll call someone to prepare. Mo will definitely be hungry. Saying that, she gritted her teeth. This regent really doesn't know how to take care of people. The regent who didn't know how to take care of people was currently washing Gong Yimo's body. When his hand accidentally touched something, Gong Yimo cried out in grief. Your Highness, you have to restrain yourself this time. I can't take it anymore. Gong Ju's movements paused. After eating and drinking his fill, the terrible hostility in his body disappeared in an instant. Apart from his silver-gray hair, he looked like the cold and noble brother he used to be. He revealed a gentle smile. I know, royal sister. He deliberately rubbed her stomach. This husband is full, so I can't let my son be hungry. Gong Yimo glared at him. I'm also hungry. Good, good, good. Gong Dai readily agreed. This husband is full, so it's time to feed my wife's little mouth. Gong Yimo thought of something and her face turned red. She endured the pain all over her body and turned around, pointing her butt at him. What should she do? Every day wouldn't be so hard, right? She didn't want to be unable to get out of bed. Chapter 674. At dinner time, Shuel Yen finally saw her daughter. Although she looked delicate and weak, her shy and timid face showed that she was not injured. She blushed and couldn't help but glare at the regent. Gong Dai felt her hostility and raised his eyebrows in displeasure. As soon as he saw someone else, his terrifying aura appeared again, making the little palace maid serving the dishes feel weak in the knees. Gong Yimo couldn't help but kick Gong Dai. His cold face was too scary. You're scaring the baby. Gong Dai turned back and his eyes immediately became innocent. It was clear and bright, as if to say, I didn't. You did. Gong Yimo pinched his face with both hands. You're always so serious. What if the baby becomes like you when she comes out? Smile. After being eaten by Gong Dai, Gong Yimo's courage had clearly increased. Gong Dai was not angry and actually smiled warmly at her. Smiling like this. Then he turned and smiled coldly at Shuel Yen. Are you still scared like this? I've never seen such a change in expression. Fuya coughed dryly and hugged his frightened wife. Your Highness, you don't have to be so polite, we're used to it. Gong Dai nodded with satisfaction. Gong Yimo looked at her parents with resentment and then angrily ate her food. However, Gong Dai, Fuya, and Shuel Yen did not touch their chopsticks. Although they saw the young couple getting along well, they would only feel at ease when they heard the regent personally say what he would do to the people of Lotus. Gong Dai said coldly to Fuya as he picked out the bones in Gong Yimo's fish. How many people of Snow Clan are there in Lotus? Fuya glanced at his wife and said in a low voice, 8,000 people. Gong Dai couldn't help but sneer and glance at Fuya. You're not afraid of inviting trouble. He gave the order to kill the people of Snow Clan, but this person secretly provided them with shelter. Fuya had no other choice. He hugged his wife's waist. Whatever my wife wants to do is my business. Even if I die because of it, I will not shirk my responsibility. When Gong Dai heard this, he suddenly changed his view of this elegant and gentle man. He put the fish into Gong Yimo's bowl and watched her eat obediently by his side. He felt very satisfied. He thought that whatever the royal sister wanted to do, he would do it without hesitation. Therefore, I can let you go. Shulian was overjoyed. Really? Gong Dai coldly snorted, don't be happy too early. This prince has a request. He narrowed his eyes and said, the Snow Clan has around 30,000 people left. You can summon them, but you have to take care of them. You can't take in the evil Snow Clan members. If I find them, I'll slaughter your entire country. Shuel Yan was a little nervous. You mean to say that you want to turn Lotus Country into Snow Country? Why can't I? Gong Dai peeled the eggshell for Gong Yimo. That slow movement was really pleasing to the eye. The Snow Clan members who don't want to assimilate and don't want to come to you are asking for it. And with Shulian guarding, Xue Qianzhong and the others would definitely not be able to come in. They would only be slaughtered outside. Shulian and Fuya discussed in a low voice. We agree. Gong Dai nodded. When the time comes, I will send an army to assist you. Fuya smiled bitterly. Although it was called assistance, it was actually surveillance. But it didn't matter, as long as Lotus Country escaped this disaster. The atmosphere eased a little. Everyone started to eat. Suddenly, Gong Yimo shouted, not good. What's wrong? Gong Dai was the first to respond. Gong Yimo looked at him. Master. Master hasn't eaten yet. And it was said that Master was tied up by Gong Dai. Scary. She actually thought of it after being intimate for an entire afternoon. She was unfilial. Gong Ju's face sank, and the atmosphere that had just eased suddenly turned cold. He is not your master. Gong Yimo did not know how to explain it to him. He is my master. As for why, I will explain it to you tonight, okay? Can I go and release him? No. Gong Dai's expression was cold. You are not allowed to leave me. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue guiltily. Then get someone to bring him here. Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied. It was not easy to reunite with the royal sister. Who would want to see someone who was in the way? But in the end, he was defeated by Gong Yimo's gaze. He waved his hands to get someone. When Qiu Xingfeng came and saw Gong Dai, he was a little wary. He did not expect Gong Dai to be so powerful. He was only 18 years old and he had reached the 8th level of wind and nature. He was simply not human. No wonder he could subdue him so quickly. Momo, are you okay? Qiu Xingfeng was still very worried about Gong Yimo. Seeing the pure worry in Qiu Xingfeng's clear eyes, Gong Yimo giggled and said, I'm fine. That, master, I seem to have misunderstood you. Qiu Xingfeng scratched his head in embarrassment. He was to blame for this blunder. If not for Gong Dai, he would not have known that pregnancy was so complicated. It's okay. Your child is my child. I will take good care of him. Gong Dai was jealous. He pulled Gong Yimo into his arms. You don't have to worry about my child. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo pushed him. If not for master saving me, I would have died from blood loss in the water with such a serious injury. Gong Dai's eyes darkened. You are poisoned. It won't let you die. At this moment, Shuoyan widened her eyes. You're saying that Immerse is poisoned. You're saying that I'm poisoned. Gong Yimo also put down her chopsticks and pointed at herself. Gong Dai looked at her hesitantly. Royal sister, did you not have an attack during this period of time? No. Gong Yimo was a bit scared. What would happen if I had an attack? Gong Dai immediately thought of the scene when she jumped off the cliff. Nothing will happen. Royal sister, even if you have an attack, I will control you. Shuoyan was a bit confused. But if Immerse was really poisoned, how could she not have an attack for 2 months? Gong Dai comforted Royal sister and then said to Shuoyan with a frown, maybe it's because Royal sister is pregnant. Gong Yimo was a bit scared when she heard this. Then will the poison hurt the baby? It won't. Gong Dai's expression softened and he patted her head. I won't let anything happen to you. Gong Yimo finally felt at ease. Gong Dai asked Shuoyan sternly, you are the only one who knows the Shui family the best. This matter concerns royal sister, so you should tell me clearly. Shuoyan was a bit scared. In fact, whenever she thought of what happened when she was young, she would feel like dying. But for her daughter, she could only reveal the past that she didn't want to recall. What do you want to know? Gong Dai tightened his grip on Gong Yimo's hand. This prince wants to know if you have the antidote for the poison and if you know how to make it. Chapter 675. Shuoyan looked a bit dispirited. No, I only made 3 antidotes. Shuesa and I each took 1, and I don't know the formula. Where's the other one? It's in my father's hands. But her father had died long ago, so naturally no one knew where the antidote was. Gong Dai frowned, obviously dissatisfied with this result. He took out the stone heart hanging around Royal Sister's neck. Then what else can it do besides transmitting sound? Shuoyan avoided the stone heart. She had been tortured by the holy stone since she was a child, so naturally she didn't like the stone heart that appeared at the same time as her pregnancy. But she was born with the ability to sense the stone heart, so she recognized Gong Yimo at a glance. Shuoyan stammered, I'm not sure. It came in a strange way, and no one has tested its use, so we can only guess. Gong Dai was a bit annoyed, so the only explanation for Royal Sister's poison not acting up is that she's pregnant. What happens after the child is born? Maybe it will act up again. For a moment, everyone's mood was a bit heavy. Qiu Xingfeng didn't understand why everyone was so depressed. He walked up and touched Gong Yimo's hair. Isn't there another antidote? Can't we find it before the child is born? Gong Dai slapped Qiu Xingfeng's hand away. She's my wife, please stay away from her. Qiu Xingfeng felt wronged. He pouted and said in a low voice, but I've been touching her whenever I want these 2 months. Gong Dai suddenly exploded with cold air. You still dare to say that? The sound of him gnashing his teeth seemed to want to crush Qiu Xingfeng. Gong Yimo quickly smoothed things over and poured a glass of water for Gong Dai, husband. Master is still young. He was a 30-year-old man. But Chu Xingfeng was shameless. He stood beside Gong Yimo. "She's my little disciple, you can't stop me from getting close to her." Gong Dai accidentally crushed the glass. Seeing that the two were about to fight, Gong Yimo quickly held Gong Dai's hand. "Husband, I'm dizzy." Gong Dai let go of Chu Xingfeng, thinking that he might have tired royal sister this afternoon, so he softened his tone, although it was still very stiff. "Are you full?" "Yes." Gong Yimo nodded obediently. Hearing this, Gong Dai directly carried Gong Yimo's waist, looked at Chu Xingfeng provocatively, and prepared to leave. Chu Xingfeng was irritated and mumbled, "What's so great about that? I often carry her on my back too." Gong Dai stopped his steps. "Don't pull me, I'm going to kill this guy who doesn't know what's good for him." After fighting like this, Gong Yimo finally coaxed Gong Dai into the room. At night, the two covered themselves with the quilt and chatted. Gong Yimo said, "I feel that there are a lot of memory fragments in my head, I just need to sort them out. Can you tell me about the past?" "In the dark," Gong Yimo said softly. Gong Dai hugged her and readily agreed. "Where do you want me to start?" Gong Emo blinked. "Let's start from when you first met me." That was a really long story, because they had known each other for 12 years. At that time, I was 6 years old, in the cold palace. Gong Dai's voice was very pleasant. In the dark, he didn't see Gong Yimo's constantly widening eyes. Every time he said a word, those disordered memories obediently returned to their original positions, becoming a complete animation instead of fragments. But these memories were different from her original memories. At first, she was surprised. Then, as she listened, she gradually felt a lump in her throat. So, they had experienced so much. The past was like a slideshow. She remembered the past that Gong Dai talked about. She also remembered the things that Gong Dai didn't know. So, not only did she transmigrate, she was also reborn. Thinking about it now, she suddenly felt very lucky. If she didn't stay in the palace back then, if she didn't save Gong Dai, she wouldn't have such a good man now. Indeed, many people were afraid of him, because he didn't care about emotions, because he was cold-blooded and heartless. They were afraid of his power and status, afraid of everything in his hands. But he was really good to her, loved her, respected her, and accommodated her. He was obviously a strong person, but he never restrained her. She was very grateful for all of this. Then, when she heard Gong Che's name, her brain couldn't help but think of all the scenes related to Gong Che. When she heard the things he did, when she heard that he finally died for her, her heart suddenly ached. At that moment, her brain seemed to have become a bottomless pit, producing a terrifying whirlpool that sucked in everything around her. She remembered everything. But when she remembered, she seemed to hear the sound of bones breaking. She couldn't help but cry out in pain and burrowed into Gong Dai's arms. "Royal sister. What happened to you?" Gong Dai hurriedly sat up. In the dark, he saw Gong Yimo's forehead full of cold sweat. He hurriedly got up to call the doctor, but Gong Yimo held him down. "I'm fine." In the dark, her voice was cold and hard, with a trace of trembling. Gong Dai didn't believe her. "Royal sister, it's okay. If you can't remember, then don't think about it." "It's okay." Gong Yimo opened her mouth. But what should she do? She remembered everything. She threw herself into Gong Dai's arms, her voice trembling even more. "Gong Dai. Is Brother Crown Prince really dead?" Gong Dai hurriedly hugged her and comforted her back. At this point, it was no wonder that royal sister was so upset. Someone died because of her, and it was a family member that she valued. But Gong Dai didn't want to lie to her. In the dark, he gently nodded. "He's already been buried in the imperial mausoleum." Gong Yimo suddenly burst into tears. Her hands tightly grasped Gong Dai's clothes on his back, her whole body trembling. Gong Dai. Why? My heart hurts so much. It hurts so much. Gong Dai regretted it. If he had known, he wouldn't have told him or. If he hadn't told her, she wouldn't be so upset. It's okay. It's all in the past. Royal sister, it's all in the past. He carelessly kissed her hair. She cried until his heart ached. Sob, sob. Gong Dai. I'm so upset. I remember now. It's brother Crown Prince who saved me. She cried until she couldn't catch her breath. Big beads of tears kept falling. She tightly hugged Gong Dai, as if she was hugging her last life-saving straw. It's him. He cushioned my body. He tightly protected my head. Gong Dai. I heard the sound of his bones breaking. I really heard it. It's okay now. Gong Dai's voice was heavy. He was willing to die for you. He was willing, and I was willing too. Once she thought about the sound of bones breaking, the turbulent river water, and Gong Che's last words, Gong Yimo felt extremely upset. In this life, she still owed him. She clearly didn't respond to him, but he still died because of her. She thought that he had let go and could be a good emperor in peace. But when she thought about the words he said to her when they fell off the cliff. "Mor, I still can't be your brother." That fool. Gong Yimo couldn't stop crying. She was wrong. She shouldn't have provoked him. She shouldn't have provoked him. She shouldn't have been so nice to him. She should have treated him as a stranger. Brother Crown Prince, Gong Yimo's tears wet Gong Dai's shoulder. I'm sorry. Gong Dai hugged her, his heart aching. Seeing her sad, he was even sadder than her. But he couldn't comfort her. If she didn't cry, it would only make her feel worse. Chapter 676. Gong Che was in a lot of pain. When he woke up, he found himself in an environment where he was restricted everywhere. Mor didn't exist in this world. He still wanted to marry another woman. Break off the engagement. He had to break off the engagement. Late at night, Gong Che returned from a walk outside. No one knew the name Gong Yimo. It was as if she had never appeared before. He didn't have time to feel discouraged. He believed that someone would know. But when he returned to the Eastern Palace, he looked up and saw the auspicious banners all over. He asked the old eunuch beside him unhappily. "What's that woman's name?" His cold voice made the eunuch tremble. The old eunuch suppressed his strange feeling and answered respectfully. "Shangzhen, Miss Shang." Gong Che frowned. The successive bad news made him even more vicious. The old eunuch almost couldn't breathe. "Go, tell her that I want to break off the engagement." "What?" The old eunuch looked up, forgetting himself. "But, tomorrow is your highness's big day. Breaking off the engagement at this juncture. How would she live?" Gong Che glared at him angrily. "What? I'm the crown prince, but I don't even have the right to break off the engagement." The old eunuch couldn't help but kneel down, his face full of worry. "Miss Shang is a very good person, your highness. I believe that if you get to know her more, you'll definitely like her." The old eunuch was sincerely looking out for Gong Che. He knew that the crown prince liked gentle and elegant ladies from noble families. He felt that Miss Shang was too bold, taking the initiative to confess her love to a man. She lacked the restraint of a lady. But Miss Shang was top-notch in both appearance and intelligence. The crown prince was only angry at Miss Shang because the marriage didn't go well. Once they got married, he would definitely like her. Gong Che sneered. He would only like one person. Someone who didn't exist here. Thinking of this, his eyes darkened. Could it be that God was punishing him for not being able to get Immerse? He was punishing him to a place where Immerse didn't exist. How cruel. He flung his sleeves and walked into the bedchamber, completely ignoring the old eunuch who was still kneeling at the door. The eunuch was very responsible, but Gong Che was no longer the same Gong Che. The old eunuch was still debating whether or not he should get up. If it was the crown prince in the past, he would not be so conflicted. However, after the crown prince woke up, he became very strange. First, he went around asking people if they knew Gong Yimo. Then, he said that he wanted to break off the engagement. Miss Shang was such a good person. If he missed this opportunity, there wouldn't be another one. After all, the old eunuch had lived for so long, and he knew where the knot in Gong Che's heart was. As the crown prince, he was already 22 years old, but not a single noble lady was willing to marry him. His Majesty also seemed to have forgotten about this child. That was right. His Majesty had too many children. How could he remember this son whose mother had died? It wasn't easy to find someone with outstanding looks who was willing to marry him, but it turned out to be a woman from Jianghu. His Highness had no choice but to marry her. Because the emperor liked Miss Shang very much, he ordered the crown prince to get married as soon as possible. At this moment, the tightly shut door suddenly opened again. Gong Che walked out and handed a letter to the eunuch. Take this to that woman. I will compensate her for her loss. But this marriage, let's call it off. That letter was like a hot potato, causing the old eunuch's face to turn bitter. He really wanted to break off the engagement. Tomorrow was the big wedding. How would he explain it to the emperor? I'm afraid His Majesty will not agree. Gong Che had already made up his mind. Imperial father, I have my own plans. If she continues to pester, tell her the truth. Tell her that he did not like her. All of this was the emperor's idea. The eunuch had no choice but to send the letter. He secretly thought that the crown prince would definitely regret it in the future. Gong Che did not have the mood to figure out what the eunuch was thinking. Looking at the bleak courtyard, he was a little lost. If this world really did not have Immerse, then what was the point of him being reborn? The night wind surged, and it was a little cold. However, he did not seem to feel it. His heart alternated between bitterness and bitterness. He did not know how Immerse was doing now. Was she well? Was her child well? Although he had never received any response from her, it was true that he hoped for her well. It was a pity that he was not the one who gave her happiness. From the age of 14 to 22, such a long period of love and protection was like a dream filled with regret. He did not regret falling in love with her. He only regretted that he could not control himself. He had brought her a lot of trouble. Gong Che. At that moment, Gong Che thought that he was hallucinating. He turned his head to look and was unable to recover for a long time. Gong Yimo had originally followed the rules and hid in the side hall, not seeing him for 3 days before the wedding. She was full of expectations. But she did not expect that Gong Che would break off the engagement at this time. Under the moonlight, Gong Che watched as Gong Yimo walked towards him step by step. Plop. Plop. He felt that his illness was acting up. Immerse. He called out silently and walked towards her as if he was in a dream. Could it be that Immerse was also dead? Did she fall into this world with him? Although it was selfish, at this moment, he was only ecstatic. Was she well? He wanted to hug her so much. However, a sword was placed in front of him. He looked at the lovely person in front of him and felt that something was not right. Gong Yimo glared at him. Other than anger, there was only pain in her eyes. So, you don't like me at all? She did not give up at first, so the old eunuch told her everything. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She pointed her sword at Gong Che. I thought that you were boring by nature, but I did not expect that you did not like me at all. You even thought that I was not reserved enough. You only like those delicate and gentle ladies. You were willing to marry me because of Uncle Emperor. Why didn't you say that you didn't want to marry me? She misunderstood and thought that he had feelings for her. Gong Che did not understand. How could he not like her? He loved her so much that he dreamed of her every day. How could he not like her? Seeing that Gong Yimo was so angry that she was crying, his heart ached. Don't cry, how could I not cry? Gong Yimo glared at him fiercely. Since you don't like me, why force yourself? You even used a letter to humiliate me. I was sincere to you. Not only did you break off the marriage at the last minute, you even said that you wanted compensation. Let me tell you, I don't want your compensation. As she said that, the letter in her hand shattered into pieces. Gong Che looked at the letter and his brain was still in a daze. On the other side, Gong Yimo had already wiped away her tears and sheathed her sword. She looked at him coldly and said, "Forget it. You don't love me, so I won't force you. From today onwards, you and I are no longer friends. I will return to Mount Yunding now. I hope that you can find a noble lady to your liking. I am not worthy of you. See you never." Gong Che widened his eyes. Wait, but before he could finish speaking, she had already turned and left. Her speed was so fast that Gong Che could not catch up with her. "Mo, Gong Che shouted, but there was no one in the courtyard. No one answered. What was going on? Was he dreaming? At this moment, the old eunuch hiding in the dark saw that the crown prince seemed to be regretting it and ran out to speak. "Your Highness, if you can't let go of Miss Shang, you should still be able to chase after her now." Gong Che suddenly grabbed his collar and asked in disbelief. "You're saying, she is Shangzhen?" Yes, Mo had said that she came to his side under an alias. So he had returned to his previous life. Chapter 677. After Gong Yimo was tired from crying, she fell into a deep sleep. Gong Dai saw that she was frowning even as she slept. He sighed and got up to wipe her face with a handkerchief. He thought that she didn't have to be so sad. He felt that no matter how many times it happened, Gong Che would jump down to save her. If he could move at that time, he would have done the same. Thinking back to the day of the wedding, when his royal sister said those words in a daze, Gong Dai could basically guess. His royal sister was like the main character in a drama. Zhou Zhuang had a dream, and in that dream, Gong Che betrayed her and he also pointed his sword at her. Gong Dai couldn't help but kiss her face. If all of this was true, how much had this little woman gone through to reach this point? How many burdens had she once carried on her thin shoulders? How much pain had she borne? So much so that those few words that day had shed tears of blood. He thought back to the day of the wedding, when she was wearing a wedding dress and said to him with bloodshot eyes, "Gong Dai, I'm in so much pain." That aggrieved and scared voice made him want to kill himself. How could he bear to see her in pain? If she was in pain, he would only be in more pain. He lowered his head and kissed her nose, bit her lips, and finally touched her long hair. It's all in the past. In the darkness, Gong Yimo curled up in his arms. Her eyes were tightly shut, as if she was having a bad dream. Perhaps it was best that she didn't remember anything. Gong Dai sighed and patted her back. It's all in the past whether you remember or not. He chuckled. In the future, with me around, there won't be any more suffering. As if she had heard his words, Gong Yimo's little brows gradually relaxed. Along the way, she had gone through so many hardships and created so many glorious legends. But now, she looked so delicate and weak. She was just a cute little wife with a cute little baby in her stomach. In her dream, she seemed to see endless fields and blue skies. Those storms seemed to be far away. Even if they weren't, she had an umbrella to protect herself. She didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Holding Gong Dai's fingers tightly, she slept until dawn. After dawn, Gong Yimo's mood was still very low. Gong Dai couldn't help but ask, "Royal sister, you remembered everything?" Gong Yimo's eyes turned and she said in a low voice, "No. I only remembered part of it." Gong Dai didn't suspect her and patted her back. He thought very clearly. Those memories the royal sister had weren't good memories. Since she had forgotten them, then forget it. Anyway, he would fill this gap in the future. Now that he had found her, Gong Dai wanted to take royal sister away. Shuoyan didn't want to. In her opinion, how could a man like Gong Dai take good care of her daughter? But Gong Dai's identity as the great regent meant that he couldn't stay outside for too long. Qiu Xingfeng had nowhere to go. Naturally, he would leave with Gong Yimo. Before leaving, Shuoyan pulled Gong Yimo aside and whispered, "I don't know why, but when I think of you leaving, I feel very uneasy. It's like something big is going to happen." Gong Yimo giggled. "Mother, don't worry. Godfather is so good to you and the Snow Clan is safe. What are you worried about? Besides, don't you have me and Gong Dai?" Shuoyan thought it was right. The regent was very capable. What could happen to Mo with him? The mother and daughter whispered. "Mo tell me honestly. Have you recovered your memories?" Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai in the distance, nodded and said mysteriously, "Mother, don't tell anyone." Shuoyan smiled and glared at her. Then she frowned and said hesitantly, "Mo, if something happens in the future that you can't control, you should eat the stone heart." Gong Yimo was shocked. Wouldn't that be worse than poison? Shuoyan wasn't sure. "It's just a feeling. This thing is different for you. I grew up with stone powder. I have an inexplicable intuition about this thing. But unless it's absolutely necessary, don't take the risk." Gong Yimo nodded. She definitely wouldn't eat anything carelessly. After agreeing, she pulled her mother's hand and said with a smile, "Although we haven't been together for a long time, I still really like you as my mother." Shuoyan's eyes couldn't help but redden. "Silly child, what nonsense are you saying? Take care of the baby. When you give birth, mother will go and see you." Gong Yimo said with a smile, then it settled. The two chatted and laughed for a while. Finally, they said goodbye. Fu Ye and Shuoyan watched as Gong Dai led the group away. That mighty group stirred up endless dust. Some people didn't want to be calm, but they had no choice. Some people wanted to be calm, but they were destined not to be calm. After bidding farewell to Shuoyan, Gong Dai personally thanked the king of Yi country. When he heard that Gong Dai was leaving, the king almost cried tears of joy. The group of people returned to Dai Yu State in a mighty manner. At that time, it was snowing heavily. It was winter. Gong Yimo first went to pay her respects to Father Emperor and Crown Prince. Her heart was heavy. Her eyes were heavy and bloodthirsty killing intent flashed past. "Father Emperor, Crown Prince Gage, I was the one who caused your deaths. I'm sorry." She closed her eyes and suppressed the heavy killing intent in her chest. But those people who deserved to die, she would not let a single one of them off. She poured a cup of wine, and sighed in her heart. "I hope that your spirit in heaven can bless Dai Yu State and bless it with prosperity. As long as I am here, I will protect it." Gong Dai stepped forward and hugged her waist. Don't be too sad. You must be tired from the journey. Let's go back and rest. Gong Yimo shook her head. Didn't you say that you caught Qiu Zhongchan and Shui Wuxi? They might know where Shui Qianchong is. On the way, Gong Dai told Gong Yimo everything in detail. So Gong Yimo knew very well. Gong Dai saw that she was sad and could not go against her wishes. He brought her to Zhao prison to see Qiu Zhongchan and Shui Wuxi. Gong Dai did not punish them, but he purposely locked them up together. Every time Shui Wuxi's poison acted up, Qiu Zhongchan would be tortured physically and mentally. This was more severe than any other punishment. Gong Dai used Yunding Mountain to threaten Qiu Zhongchan. But in the end, only Qiu Zhongchan and Shui Wuxi appeared. He did not find Shui Qianchong and Li Xiu. But it was better than nothing. He locked them up to vent his anger. He thought that one day, he would let Royal Sister torture them. He did not expect that the day would really come. Gong Yimo looked at the two scary people in the cell. Shui Wuxi was curled up in the corner like a lunatic. Because he was afraid that she would disturb Gong Yimo, Gong Dai had people tie her up. Interestingly, Qiu Zhongchan did not stop him. Gong Yimo glanced at the two and pulled Gong Dai aside. Bring Qiu Zhongchan out. I want to interrogate him alone. Chapter 678. Gong Dai naturally agreed and ordered people to bring a chair, a brazier, a hand warmer and some snacks. This made Gong Yimo relax. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm not that weak. When Gong Dai saw her now, he thought of how she jumped off the cliff with her child. She was so fragile. How was she not weak? You have to listen to me. Otherwise, I'll carry you back to rest. Gong Dai said with a cold face. The guards around wanted to poke their eyes out. Such a gentle prince. It was as if he was a different person. They couldn't accept it. Give them back their domineering prince regent. Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. How could she not be happy when a man wanted to spoil her? I want to eat sour plums. Gong Dai glanced at a person coldly. That person immediately went to prepare. The feeling of being spoiled was so good. Gong Yimo thought happily. Qiu Zhongchan was quickly brought out. In a few months, he had aged a lot. Gong Dai didn't destroy his martial arts. But because of Shui Wuxi, he had been injured. At this time, he stood weakly in front of Gong Yimo. He didn't have the elegance of Daoist Qiu of Yunding Mountain. Gong Yimo didn't talk nonsense. She asked directly, do you know where Shui Qianzhong went? Qiu Zhongchan refused to say because Shui Qianzhong promised him. As long as he didn't confess, he would protect Li Xiu. She was his daughter. He couldn't be so selfish. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Gong Yimo didn't get angry. How about this? As long as you confess, I'll give Shui Wuxi the antidote. How about it? Qiu Zhongchan suddenly looked up and stared at her. There's no antidote for goo poison. He knew clearly. Gong Yimo smiled slyly. How can there be no antidote? You see, I was also poisoned and almost died. But now, I'm fine. No, impossible. Qiu Zhongchan stared at Gong Yimo. The last time she acted up was still fresh in his mind, but now, she was pampered very well. Her entire body was glowing, and she even seemed to have put on some weight. If she was like Wuxi, acting up once every 7 days, she wouldn't be so calm. You don't believe me? Gong Yimo smiled meaningfully. Or is it that in your heart, Shui Wuxi is like a madman and can't compare to your daughter? No. He scratched his head in pain. There is no antidote for the goo poison. You just can't find it. Gong Yimo smiled. I saw Shulian, my mother. You and Shui Qianzhong must have seen her too, right? That's why you used her to trick me. Gong Yimo easily guessed it, and she guessed that Shulian definitely did not give them a good face. I'm her daughter. There are some things that I can't give you, but I can. It had to be said that Qiu Zhongchan already believed half of it, but he still wanted to test it out. Where did you see her? Lian Kingdom, isn't it easy to find? Qiu Zhongchan was silent. On one side was his crazy wife, on the other was his long-lost daughter. Even if he told them, his daughter might not be caught, but his wife, thinking of Shui Wuxi's hysterical look, he was in a dilemma. Gong Yimo blew a breath. My patience is limited. If you don't want to tell me, then forget it. Anyway, it's only a matter of time before we find them. She touched her belly, but Li Xiao is not the mastermind. If you confess, I'll let her go. Are you serious? Qiu Zhongchan suddenly asked anxiously. Of course. In the end, Qiu Zhongchan confessed. Lu Yi. Gong Yimo had a slight understanding. Speaking of which, he really should be there. Don't forget, there was a sacred lake there. After that, Gong Yimo released Qiu Zhongchan, but restricted his movements. When he asked about his wife, Gong Yimo only told him that the treatment would take time. Didn't he see that she only recovered after a few months? Qiu Zhongchan had been locked underground all this time and did not suspect anything. This time, when he came out, his martial arts were also restricted. But Gong Yimo gave him a way out in the end, which could be considered as repaying her kindness from her previous life. Qiu Xingfeng was undoubtedly the happiest, but Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied. This person deserves to die. Why did you let him go? Gong Yimo leaned lazily in his arms and said indifferently, now that his martial arts are greatly reduced and you have reached the 8th level of wind and nature, he is no longer a threat. Gong Dai gritted his teeth and said, it's not because of Qiu Xingfeng. Gong Yimo giggled, it's because of him. Gong Dai was not satisfied. Why are you so good to him? Is it because he saved you? It's not that. She blinked. I didn't completely lose my memory. Actually, you should have guessed it. I am like the people in the books, I have memories of my previous life. And in my previous life, Qiu Xingfeng was my master. I grew up with him. He is the closest person to me. Gong Dai suddenly covered her mouth unhappily. I am the closest person to you. Gong Yimo smiled, that's right, that's right. It's you now. The two talked as they walked back. Walking on the carved corridor, looking at the fluttering snow, their hearts were peaceful. Gong Yimo suddenly asked, that's right. I have more, so many years of memory than you. Do you think I am very old? Gong Yimo was a little nervous. If she had known, she would not have told him. What if he despised her? Gong Dai pretended to be deep in thought. Gong Yimo saw that he really dared to think. She gave him a hard slap. Gong Ju grabbed her hand and chuckled softly, so I'm at a disadvantage, Gong Dai. You. So to make it up to me, you must treat me well for the rest of your life. Gong Yimo was stunned on the spot. That silly look made Gong Dai could not help but touch her head. Silly girl. He tightened the cloak for her. When I was young, I thought you were a fairy. He suddenly said something seemingly unrelated with a serious expression. But fairies are very old. Every one of them should be at least 1,000 years old, right? The fluttering snow made his face look even more handsome, but those inky eyes were filled with tenderness that could not be melted. I liked you when I thought you were at least 1,000 years old. I didn't expect you to be so young. That's unexpected. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo felt that something was wrong. She frowned. Why do I feel that you are saying something bad? Gong Dai chuckled. How is that possible? Everything I say is good. Just as Gong Yimo was feeling conflicted, someone suddenly came to report. He looked hurried. Obviously, something big had happened. Gong Dai did not expect something to happen the moment he returned. He took the secret report and read it. What's wrong? Gong Yimo was a little curious. Gong Dai's expression was indescribable. He closed the report and smiled. It's nothing. It's a letter from Yuheng. Kim Yoon said that there was a riot in Yuheng and asked me for help. How could it be Yuheng? Chapter 679. There was a riot in Yuheng a month ago, but it was suppressed. But this time, the riot was much more serious than the previous one. A group of irrational people burned, killed, and looted in an organized manner. They were not afraid of death. The cost of suppressing them was huge, and they could not find the source. The badly battered Kim Yoon heard that the Daewoo state was the first to have such a situation, so he asked Gong Dai for help. Gong Yimo had a complicated expression. Looks like Shuesei escaped. Not only did he escape, he even took out all the holy stones. Otherwise, such a large amount of goo poison could not be made without the raw materials. If I knew, I would have killed him, Gong Yimo said regretfully. But it was useless to kill him. Shuesei could not come out. The only explanation was that someone found the treasure and let him out. That person was most likely Shui Qinzhong. Don't worry. Gong Dai was fearless. I won't let them hurt you. Gong Yimo was not worried about herself. Those people have twisted minds. I'm afraid they will harm the innocent. Gong Dai stroked her hair comfortingly. With me here, their plan will not succeed. Gong Yimo nodded. Then let's not delay. Let's go to Yuheng. Gong Dai was a little conflicted. Kim Yoon was in Yuheng. He really did not want to see his former love rival. Gong Yimo laughed secretly. It's okay if you are busy with government affairs and can't leave. I'll go by myself. Gong Dai hugged her tightly, gritted his teeth and said, I'll go with you. Gong Yimo saw that he was jealous and smiled like a little fox. Between lovers, how could they strengthen their relationship without a sense of crisis? Yuheng, Imperial Palace. Kim Yoon frowned as he looked at the report. He suddenly had a headache and rubbed his forehead. Everything was going well under his rule, but with such a thing happening, the people were terrified. But when he thought that Immerse was coming, his brows relaxed a lot. When Immerse went missing, Gong Dai went crazy to search for her, and he did not hesitate. 2 months had passed, and he was mentally and physically exhausted. He even thought that Immerse was really, but when he received a message from Daewoo State, he knew that Gong Dai had found Immerse. He let out a long sigh of relief. He was a little dissatisfied with Gong Dai. It must be because he did not take good care of Immerse. This time, Immerse. Before Kim Yoon could rest, there was a burst of crying. Yoon-jin was crying as she forced her way in. The palace servants could not do anything. After all, she was the emperor's mother. Did they really dare to stop her? Kim Yoon frowned when he saw her. Before he could say anything, Yoon-jin had already started crying in front of everyone. Yoon! You have to make a decision for me. Wang Jing is not human. Kim Yoon frowned and waved his hand. The palace servants left. Back then, Immerse had suggested that Yoon-jin die and be buried with the late emperor to appease the court officials. In reality, she had changed her appearance and married her guest, Wang Jing, when she was pregnant. Wang Jing's status also rose. Not only did he have an official position, but he also had a fief. It was supposed to be a happy ending. However, after she got married, Yoon-jin was used to the days of being pampered by men. How could she be willing to stay with a man like Wang Jing? She had just given birth to a child and she started to cause trouble. It was fine if it was before, but Wang Jing now had an official position and could take charge of things. How could he allow Yunjin to do this? Not only did he not allow it, but he also stubbornly took in 3 concubines after he was defeated by Yunjin. These days were completely different from what Yunjin had imagined. Yunjin then realized that she had fallen into Gong Yimo's trap. However, she was no longer the Empress Dowager because the Empress Dowager had been buried with the Emperor. She could only plead with Kim Yoon again and again, asking Kim Yoon to help her get justice and let her live the kind of licentious life she used to have. Mother, you are no longer the Empress Dowager. Moreover, you have just given birth. It is not good for you to run around. Yunjin cried until she was out of breath. You still remember that I am your mother. Why didn't you think about it when you asked Gong Yimo to plot against me? Kim Yoon was so angry that he laughed. When she was pregnant, she didn't want to have a miscarriage or guard the imperial mausoleum. Mo had already given her the best way out. It was she who insisted on causing trouble and didn't want to lead a good life. After she got married, she still hoped that Wang Jing, who was no longer a pampered man, would pamper and respect her like the Empress Dowager. If she had known this would happen, why did she do it in the first place? If you had been willing to abort the child and guard the imperial mausoleum for 3 years, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Mother, now that things have come to this, it's useless to say more. Yunjin widened her eyes when she saw how determined he was. Yoon, you have changed. She cried and said, you weren't like this in the first place. You would try your best to satisfy whatever mother wanted. Since that woman appeared, you have changed. Who is the one who has changed? As a son, he shouldn't have said anything bad about his mother. However, in just 5 years, he couldn't see any of Yunjin's innocence from back then. A person's heart wasn't content. She would never be satisfied. At this moment, a palace servant knocked on the door and asked softly. Your Majesty, the palace where the Dayu State's envoy is staying has been tidied up. Kim Yoon nodded and decided to take a look himself. After all, Mo's place couldn't be careless. Thus, he said to Yunjin, since you are already married, you should lead a good life like an ordinary official's wife. He thought of something and sighed. As for Wang Jing, I will ask him to divorce his concubine. You can go back. Then, he asked the palace servant to send her out. Yunjin didn't achieve her goal and gritted her teeth angrily. She wiped away her tears and suddenly thought of something. The Dayu State's envoy was coming. And since Yoon was so enthusiastic, Gong Yimo would definitely come. If it weren't for Gong Yimo, she wouldn't have lost her status as the Empress. She would remember this grudge. At this moment, Gong Dai was ready and could set off at any time. He had 6 ministers under him and they were divided into 2 groups. They could supervise each other. When he wasn't around, most of the government affairs were handled by them. If they couldn't handle it, Bai Xing would quickly send it to him. Generally speaking, there wouldn't be any major mistakes. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai was so busy that he couldn't split himself and couldn't help but feel sorry for him. After he became the new emperor, he went around looking for her. Although he didn't lose any government affairs in the process, there was still a backlog. Thus, before he returned, Gong Yimo took the opportunity to take a pen and write memorials for him. She was the one who taught Gong Dai how to write, so it was easy for her to imitate his handwriting. The annoying part was that they still liked to use writing brushes, saying that they respected tradition. Thus, even though writing brushes were popular now, in some formal occasions, people were still used to using writing brushes. Thus, Gong Yimo practiced a few large characters on paper before she started to write memorials. Now that the new emperor was young, he was handed over to the former empress, who was now the Empress Dowager. Ever since the Crown Prince died, the Empress Dowager had become despondent. However, on account of Gong Chai's rescue, Gong Dai still took care of her. Her life was good, but her heart wouldn't get better. Chapter 680. Gong Yimo did not look for her either. There was enmity between them now. Her brother, the Crown Prince, had died for her, but she had survived. The Empress Dowager would probably not be able to accept this result. Gong Yimo's eyes darkened. She continued to flip through the memorials and realized that there were many memorials that were related to her. Because of her, she had caused the death of the Empress Dowager Che. Therefore, many people were very concerned about how she would be dealt with after her return. Some requested that she enter the Imperial Ancestral Temple to atone for her sins, while others requested that she be imprisoned for life. In short, no one wished for her to marry Gong Dai. After all, if it happened again and Gong Dai died because of her, the Daiyu state would not know what to do. People who did not practice martial arts had no concept of martial arts. However, Gong Yimo was very clear that if she were to be poisoned again, Gong Dai would be able to control her. Therefore, even if she was worried about Gong Dai's safety, she would not leave him. She rubbed her stomach. Ever since her pregnancy had stabilized, she no longer felt impetuous. She was a little worried that the poison had been transferred to the child. However, worrying now was useless. It was better to focus on the matter at hand. Wasn't there still an antidote? This was the scene that Gong Dai saw when he returned. In Zhaoyang Hall, the study table that belonged to the emperor was filled with memorials. Gong Yimo was sitting there, drawing with her imperial brush. Her expression was focused and dignified. She did not tie her hair into a bun. She only tied it into a high ponytail, which made her small face look even more serious. However, she was calm and composed as she drew, as if everything was under her control. At that moment, Gong Dai seemed to have seen a female empress. Hearing the sound, Gong Yimo looked up at him and revealed a sweet smile. In an instant, her awe-inspiring demeanor collapsed. She turned from a little white dragon to a little white rabbit. "You're back." Gong Dai could not help but smile. He realized that as long as he saw her, he would feel at ease. No matter how busy he was outside, when he heard her light voice, all his fatigue would be swept away, leaving behind a sense of fulfillment. "You're helping me with my memorials?" Gong Yimo nodded. "I have nothing to do anyway." The chair was very big and there was no problem for two people to sit on it. However, Gong Dai insisted on hugging her and taking in her sweetness. Behind Gong Dai was a monkey. Originally, Gong Dai had gone out to look for someone. The monkey thought that it had ushered in its spring, but it did not expect it to return so quickly. It wanted to cry, but no tears came out. However, it was very obedient around Gong Dai. When it saw Gong Dai carrying Gong Yimo, it jumped onto the table to grind the ink. Gong Yimo chuckled. "I don't need ink." She only used cinnabar. She said to Gong Dai, "This monkey has been well trained by you." Gong Dai coldly glanced at it. The little monkey instantly revealed a fawning expression. It had a piece of holy stone around its neck. It was unknown where a monkey got so many expressions from. Gong Yimo could not help but reach out to touch the stone. When she first touched the stone, she felt very uncomfortable. It was very likely that when she first touched it, it had a reaction with the blood that came from her mother's womb, which was why it affected her. However, after a long time of contact, the effect gradually weakened. Thus, at the beginning, it was possible for Snow to use the holy stone to bewitch her. However, after she developed a resistance, there was no chance. Moreover, not only did she inherit the physique that her mother brought, she was also poisoned. Even Stoneheart could not control her, so those people should also give up on controlling her. After fiddling with it, Gong Yimo said to Gong Dai, I just read through the memorials and found that many people are still very afraid of me. That's right, even Crown Prince Gij died because of me. Gong Dai hugged her hand tightly. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He thought of something and said worriedly, with my martial strength now, you don't have to worry about anything at all, so you're not allowed to leave me. Don't even think about it. Gong Yimo sat on his lap and chuckled. I didn't say I was going to leave. I still want to rely on you for a lifetime. Gong Dai nodded. I'll allow you to rely on me for a lifetime. Gong Yimo found a comfortable position in his arms and continued to flip through the memorials. If she encountered any problems, she would say a few words to him. Towards the end, she was too lazy to think. She would read it out, he would answer, and she would write down his answer. The two of them were reading the memorials together, and it was actually fun. Gong Yimo pouted. Gong Dai, I suddenly feel that you're so tired. You have to be busy with this and that. Gong Dai nestled in her ear and laughed. So, little heartless girl, you're going to help me read the memorials in the future and share my worries? I don't want to. Gong Yimo subconsciously rejected. She hugged her stomach and said righteously, I'm going to carry on the family line for you. This is also a big task. Gong Dai hugged her tightly in his arms and rubbed her hard. Yes, 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 no one has a bigger task than you. You're the hero. But what should I do? Her face fell again. Giving birth is very painful. I'm afraid of pain. Even the powerful regent had no way to deal with it. He rubbed Gong Yimo's ear and comforted her. Don't be afraid, I'll be with you when the time comes. There was another worry, Gong Yimo said a little embarrassedly. I heard that after giving birth, your figure will go out of shape. Gong Dai saw that her side face was red. Obviously, her little head was not only thinking about her figure going out of shape. He said softly in her ear, don't worry. When the time comes, I'll go to see Wu Yan to get some medicine. He has a lot of beautifying, nourishing, and firming medicines. Gong Yimo pouted, so you'll despise me if my figure goes out of shape. I wouldn't dare. Gong Dai reached out from behind and touched her stomach. It's good that you're ugly. That way, you won't be missed by so many people even though you're already mine. Gong Yimo snickered. She suddenly felt that she had the energy to review the booklets. She had to quickly finish reviewing them. She could go to Yuheng soon. It had been a long time since she last saw him. She wondered how Big Brother Kim Yoon was doing. Gong Dai was a little unsatisfied and hugged her like this. Because Gong Yimo was pregnant, he did not dare to indulge, so he only did it when they met. He was a young man full of vigor. He was addicted to the taste, so he had a reaction just by hugging her. Gong Yimo felt it and mischievously rubbed against him. She was still holding the booklet in her hand, but was not well behaved. She pretended to be very serious. Gong Dai, someone asked if we should add a riding and shooting event to the exam questions. I think it's feasible. What do you think? Gong Ju's hands began to sneak into the other man's clothes, but his handsome face remained serious. Then approve it. Gong Yimo's face flushed red. She could not stand his advances. She turned her head to look at him and said coquettishly, Can you be more serious? It's daytime now, and this is the study. Not the bed. Chapter 681. Gong Dai blinked his dark eyes, as if he didn't understand. His exquisite face coupled with his clean and pure eyes made Gong Yimo's heart pound again. This guy's appearance was too devilish. She didn't even have the strength to fight back. Take your hand away. But Gong Dai kissed her earlobe, feeling wronged, and said ambiguously, "Royal sister, don't you want to do it in the important office at once?" Gong Yimo instantly blushed. She originally wanted to tease him, but she didn't want to do such a shameful thing in such an important place. "No. This is where Imperial Father and the rest work." But Gong Dai had already stood up and forcefully carried Gong Yimo to the study table. He swept the booklet to one side and pressed it down. Little Monkey saw this scene and quickly covered his eyes. Gong Dai directly took off Gong Yimo's outer clothes and covered Little Monkey's body. His Adam's apple bobbed as he looked at his little wife and said, "Isn't there more feeling here? Royal sister, your heart is beating so fast." Gong Yimo's heart beat even faster. She wanted to struggle, but she was afraid of alerting the palace servants outside, so she glared fiercely at him. "Get up quickly. Also, you, don't call me royal sister at this time, okay?" She felt inexplicably embarrassed. Gong Dai pretended not to understand, "But you are my royal sister. Could it be that Imperial brother did something to make you unhappy? Royal sister." It was too embarrassing. The air seemed to be burning up. Outside, snow swirled, and the room was warm. Faced with Gong Dai's hands, Gong Yimo couldn't resist at all. Her clothes were taken off piece by piece, but Gong Dai was still well dressed. Seeing the desire in his eyes grow stronger, that handsome face blushed slightly, and he was so beautiful that he didn't look like a real person. "Royal sister," he lowered his head, his silver hair entwining with Gong Yimo's black hair. Their fingers intertwined, and his voice was low and hoarse. "I really love you." Gong Yimo was moved by his words. Her heart thumped, and all resistance turned into shyness. Seeing that she didn't resist, Gong Dai smiled and prepared to take off the last of her clothes. But at this time, a voice came from outside the door. "Your Highness, the Crown Princess requests an audience." Gong Che had died before the coronation ceremony was held, so Su Miaolon's status had become very awkward. Moreover, Gong Dai didn't care about the Crown Princess, and only locked her in the Eastern Palace, SSSSSSS. But at this time, why did she come find him? IMTS wants STS, TT have an outsider SEs. King TTTSTT wanted S's face. What if there's something? To be fair, Su Miaolon's SS life was quite miserable. In her past life, she was at least high, but in this life, she was very depressed. But seeing that she was the Crown Prince's wife, she still decided to let Gong Dai see her. She could easily escape the fate of being taken in the study. Gong Dai was a bit dissatisfied. He lowered his head and bit her lips to vent his anger. "But I'm very busy right now," Gong Yimo snickered and said innocently, "just see them." "In any case, there's still the night." Gong Dai's eyes lit up. "You're the one who said it." During this time, Gong Yimo didn't let him touch her at night, saying that she was afraid of hurting the child. He couldn't hold it in until she was 4 months pregnant. Gong Dai naturally knew which to choose between doing it hastily and doing whatever he wanted at night. Gong Yimo nodded shyly, then carried her clothes into the room. "Have a better attitude, even if it's for the Crown Prince's sake," she reminded him worriedly. Gong Dai's thin lips curved slightly. He grabbed her and kissed her for a while before letting her go, panting. "I'll punish you tonight." Gong Yimo hurriedly ran away with her clothes in her arms, her face red. Gong Dai saw that she was still so shy even though she was pregnant, so he smiled wickedly. Then, he asked someone to bring Su Miaolon in. His thinking was very simple. Perhaps it was because the palace servants treated her badly, so she came to complain. In short, although he didn't care about those women, he kept a close eye on each of them. Su Miaolon didn't have the chance to come in contact with the people in the duke's household. When Su Miaolon came in, she was still in disbelief. She had asked to see him before, but every time, she was turned away at the door. No matter how much she begged, the regent's heart was always stone. But this time, he actually saw her so easily, and in such an important place like the imperial study. She was surprised, but more than that, she was overjoyed. She walked in step by step. This kind of place usually didn't allow women to enter. She never dreamed that she would be able to enter. The luxurious decorations were all set up according to the standards of an emperor. Su Miaolon was dazed. If the crown prince didn't die and she became the empress, she could also enjoy these things. Whenever she thought of the crown prince, she would think of Gong Yimo. Su Miaolon hated this name to the bone. She didn't expect that Gong Yimo was still so seductive even though she was already married. Gong Che was actually willing to die for her. Even if he didn't want the country, even if he didn't want the throne, he still wanted to die with her. The funny thing was that he died, but Gong Yimo didn't. She was really a scourge that lived for 1,000 years. She thought that Gong Yimo wouldn't be here in such an important place like the imperial study. She calmed her breathing and walked in. Gong Dai took advantage of the time when he was receiving Su Miaolon to flip through the memorials. He found that many people were indeed afraid of the royal sister's return. His expression darkened as he thought of a way to solve this once and for all. This concubine greets the regent, a delicate voice pulled Gong Dai's thoughts back. Gong Dai raised his head and saw Su Miaolon shivering because of the cold. It was very cold outside, but she didn't wear much, making her appear pale and thin. Even though the earth was burning in Zhaoyang Hall, she still couldn't recover and kept shivering. If Gong Yimo was here, she would say, "What a delicate flower." However, Gong Dai only frowned. During the period of mourning, it didn't make sense for her to dress so delicately. "Is something the matter?" A cold and cheerless voice sounded, faintly echoing in the dazzling imperial study. The oppressive aura that belonged to the great regent made Su Miaolon's mind go blank. She couldn't think of a script for a long time. Gong Dai looked at the memorials and didn't give her another glance. The sooner he finished, the sooner he could go back and rest. When he thought about how he could hug his wife and do whatever he wanted at night, the coldness on his body seemed to be diluted by a lot. He didn't have the illusion that he was 1,000 miles away from people. Su Miaolon felt that the other party didn't seem so scary anymore. She gathered her courage and lowered her head to cry, "I beg the prince to make a decision." After the crown prince died, this concubine's life was extremely lonely and bitter. Those palace servants were used to changing the rudder according to the wind. Seeing that this concubine's status was awkward, they often bullied and humiliated. Gong Dai frowned. "You should go to the Empress Dowager for this matter." Chapter 682. Su Miaolon stuttered. "The Empress Dowager has been worried and haggard recently. She is no longer in charge." Gong Dai glanced at Su Miaolon with a headache. Speaking of which, Su Miaolon reminded him that Imperial Father valued women and there were countless beauties in the Imperial harem. However, the Empress Dowager was bedridden because of Imperial Father's death. The Empress Dowager's heart was like dead ashes because of Gong Che's matter. Now, there was no one in charge in such a large imperial harem. Sooner or later, chaos would ensue. However, Su Miaolon was obviously not a good choice. Gong Dai did not forget that this woman had always been at odds with the royal sister. "You may leave. This prince will deal with it." After Gong Dai learned of the problem, he directly sent the people away. It was gloomy outside because of the snow, so the room was lit during the day. The warm candlelight lit up Gong Dai's handsome face. That indifferent expression and the domineering aura it emitted from his bones made Su Miaolan's legs go weak. She was even more fascinated. If only she was married to Gong Ju. Originally, she thought that the crown prince would definitely become the emperor. She did not expect that the crown prince would die. The power to rule the country still fell into Gong Dai's hands. The title of Grand Regent was well deserved. Moreover, although Gong Yimo had returned, she was pregnant. Apart from Gong Yimo, there was no other woman by the regent's side. She was afraid that during this period of time, he would not have a good time. Su Miaolan's thoughts flashed like lightning. If only she could climb onto the regent's bed. Not only would she be able to anger that slut Gong Yimo to death, the regent would also be a rare good husband in the world. Therefore, she bowed gently and weakly, trying to make every posture graceful. Your Highness, this concubine still has something to report. Gong Dai felt a little strange. He finally put down the booklet in his hand and looked at her seriously. What is it? Su Miaolan's cheeks involuntarily turned red when she was looked at by those dark jade eyes. Step by step, she walked closer to Gong Dai. Seeing that there was no one around, she whispered in an especially teasing voice. Your Highness, this concubine is still a virgin. This sentence stunned Gong Dai, and then his sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a figure secretly hiding behind the curtain, listening attentively. He suppressed the scolding that was about to come out of his mouth, smiled, and said in a soft voice. So. Su Miaolan's eyes lit up. She was also taking a gamble. She originally thought that with the regent's temperament, she would probably be driven out by what she said. But now that she heard his specious words, she was so excited that her body was trembling. She didn't want to be a woman waiting for death in the harem. She wanted to make a comeback. She wanted power. Not only did she want to defeat Gong Yimo, but she also wanted to win. She wanted Gong Yimo to die a horrible death. Gong Yimo tightened her grip on the curtain. Good for you, Gong Dai. She had given him such an obvious hint, and he was still pretending not to understand. Did she not feed him enough? It seemed like there really wasn't. But he wasn't allowed to find anyone else. Su Miaolan took another step forward. At this time, she and Gong Dai were only separated by a table. Her face was shy and timid, and she wanted to say something, but stopped. Your Highness, with this concubine's status, I can no longer marry. But the night is long, and I will be lonely, she said vaguely, and her tone was very provocative. From time to time, she would glance at Gong Dai's expression. She thought that if an ordinary man heard her say this, he wouldn't be able to resist. But this Gong Dai was able to endure it. She couldn't help but add fuel to the fire, and said softly. Now that the princess is pregnant, I'm afraid that Your Highness isn't feeling well, right? She seduced him with her charming eyes, full of adoration. At this moment, Gong Dai clearly heard Gong Yimo's violent gasps, and he secretly laughed. The royal sister was jealous of him, and this feeling really made him happy. He couldn't wait to hug her and rub her. Seeing that Gong Dai seemed to be distracted, Su Miaolan felt a little strange. But at this critical moment, she could only brace herself and call out again. Your Highness. Gong Dai suddenly looked at her, and his cold eyes stunned her. She had said so much, but why was this man's attitude still so cold? What do you want? Gong Dai actually asked her what she wanted. Gong Yimo almost pulled the curtain down. She wanted to sleep with you, was she stupid? Su Miaolan suppressed her excitement and lowered her head. If your highness is willing, this concubine can give up her status. Just let this concubine relieve your highness's worries for the next few months. She believed that as long as Gong Dai slept with her, he would definitely give her a status. Following Gong Dai was 10,000 times better than being the crown princess in name only. Moreover, Gong Yimo would probably be so angry that she would have a miscarriage. Just thinking about it made her impatient. Walala. The bead curtain was flung aside, and a woman quickly walked out. Su Miaolon looked carefully and found that it was Gong Yimo. Her face was instantly replaced by hatred. She couldn't help it. This woman. Why wasn't she the one who died? Gong Yimo was still angry. She directly sat down in Gong Ju's arms and proudly raised her chin to show off. My man's suffering for the next few months is none of your business. If you want to find someone to comfort you, go find a guard. Don't even think about it. As she spoke, she hugged Gong Dai and then fiercely pinched him several times where Su Miaolon couldn't see. Gong Dai couldn't help laughing. It was rare for someone to take the initiative to throw herself into his arms. Su Miaolon was very unwilling. Why did Gong Yimo always want to ruin her good things? She resentfully looked at Gong Yimo, and then simply threw caution to the wind. Her beautiful eyes filled with tears as she looked at Gong Dai. It's not like that. I only admire your highness. Can't I not give up my status? Instead of your highness finding someone else, isn't it better to have someone like me? Wasn't it better? She absolutely wouldn't dare to say that she had climbed into the regent's bed. What did Gong Yimo have to worry about? Could it be that she was also afraid that Gong Dai would have a change of heart? That would be the best. Gong Yimo was angered by her shamelessness. She originally wanted to give Gong Che face and not let Su Miaolon be too sad, but now she was so angry that she wanted to strangle this woman to death. But she couldn't do that. In a fit of anger, she fiercely turned around and in front of Su Miaolon, she hugged Gong Dai's face and deeply kissed him. That strength and passion was something that Gong Dai had never experienced before. Gong Dai immediately took the initiative. He pried open her teeth and kissed her ambiguously. Gong Yimo was frightened by Gong Dai's counterattack. There were still people watching. She glared at him and pushed him away. She didn't know that her watery eyes and peachy face made Gong Dai's breathing become erratic. What a seductress! Gong Yimo endured her shyness and said to Su Miaolon, whose face was ugly. Did you see? He likes me. He's interested in me. Not to mention that you're still a virgin, even if you look like a fairy. He won't even look at you. Su Miaolon almost broke her silver teeth. She wasn't willing. Why did they have to be Gong Yimo? What kind of reincarnation of a vixen was she? Why did she have to steal her man every time? Chapter 683. She clenched her handkerchief and suppressed her viciousness as she spoke. Isn't the princess being too selfish? You haven't married the prince yet, so what right do you have to care so much? This sentence touched Gong Dai's reverse scale. She was his woman, so what right did others have to tell her what to do? Seeing Gong Yimo's eyes bulging with anger, Gong Dai hurriedly comforted her with a smile. Then he coldly stared at Su Miaolon. This prince will remember Crown Princess's words. Gong Dai gently smiled, but the words he spoke made people tremble with fear. So you have needs. How about this? This prince will sentence you to return home and allow you to marry again. This seemingly magnanimous punishment made Su Miaolon's eyes widen. She couldn't believe it. Even if she was a virgin, even if she was beautiful, she was still someone who had married the crown prince. Who would dare to marry her? All the rich and powerful families would avoid her like the plague. Could it be that she, the daughter of a country-guarding marquis, had to marry a lowly merchant? A farmer. Your Highness. With this shout, her voice changed. She originally thought that with her beauty, Gong Dai would kindly accept her if she didn't even want a status. She didn't think that he would be so cruel. Gong Dai stared at Gong Yimou's white and tender earlobes as he gently comforted Gong Yimou. Su Miaolan's hatred towards the royal sister didn't escape his eyes. The royal sister missed the crown prince and always wanted to let her live, thinking that she couldn't be a threat. But Gong Dai couldn't tolerate people who had ill intentions towards the royal sister. It was fine if she didn't appear, but since she came to beg him, he naturally had to give her a good place to go. He could let her live, but he wanted her to never appear in the clan for the rest of her life. It seems that you're very excited. Then this prince will add another condition. Gong Dai's thin lips slightly moved as killing intent flashed in his eyes. This prince wants you to marry within 49 days of mourning after you return home. Moreover, you can't marry in the name of the country guarding marquis. After all, you were once married to imperial brother. This prince does not wish for imperial brother to be humiliated because of you. Su Miaolan's legs went soft and she fell to the ground. Gong Dai didn't kill her, but she had always pursued fame and status since she was a child. This was simply worse than death. Why? She simply could not accept this outcome. Without the title of marquis, she could only marry a few merchants within the next 49 days. Why? She was the crown princess, the empress. Why? Is it this woman? Su Miaolan stared at Gong Yimou with a ferocious and twisted expression. Did she say something bad about me? Your Highness, I'm innocent. Seeing that Gong Dai did not answer, she rushed forward like a madwoman. Your Highness. Look at me, I'm 1,000 times better than her. Drag him away. As soon as Gong Dai gave the order, 2 people immediately came in and dragged Su Miaolan away. Gong Yimou did not expect that Gong Dai would actually do this. She was stunned for a moment, thinking that Su Miaolan did not do anything, so there was no need to treat her like this. Before she could say anything, Gong Dai sealed her lips with a finger. The coldness in his eyes was directed at someone else. Right now, she doesn't have the chance to do anything to you. It's not that she doesn't want to. Of course, I won't give her the chance. From the moment she recommended herself as a pillow, Gong Dai had the intention to kill her. But Gong Yimou blinked. She's still Gij Crown Prince's wife. She's still a virgin. What kind of wife is she? Gong Dai's tone was faint. That sudden majesty made Gong Yimou shrink back, a little afraid of his cold and domineering appearance. Gong Dai saw her lowering her head, so he reached out and forcibly lifted her head. Look at me. Gong Yimou sat on his lap and timidly raised her head. Speaking of which, she was already used to it. Since young, Gong Dai had always given in to her. However, when he was forceful, Gong Yimou could only give in. However, when he forced her to the end, she rose up and Gong Dai could only bow his head. Are you afraid of me? His eyes were like ink and the sea, carrying a kind of danger and attraction that made one's heart palpitate. The air seemed to be a little cold. Gong Yimou nodded and then shook her head. I'm just used to it. Used to him shouting, she would pretend to be a little wife. Gong Dai laughed. Seeing her lowering her head as if she had done something wrong, he could not help but lift her chin and gently kiss her. No, she resisted like a kitten, but it was completely useless. Gong Dai kissed her until her face turned red, then reluctantly let go of her. Are you still afraid of me? At this moment, his voice was low and hoarse, and there was an indescribable ambiguity. Gong Yimou looked at him and felt that his appearance was too abnormal. No matter when, he could always make her heart palpitate. Seeing her staring at him blankly, Gong Dai could not hold it in anymore. He pressed her head and kissed her deeply. Gong Yimou's chest actually felt a little stuffy because her heart was beating too fast. Gong Dai's personal aura was too strong. She was like a prey that was tied up and could only be manipulated by him. After a long time, when he let go, Gong Yimo's body was already red. "Baby, are you still afraid?" Gong Yimo was suddenly energized. She gritted her teeth, hugged Gong Dai's neck and took the initiative to kiss him. What was there to be afraid of? He could not bear to hurt her. As for him being ruthless to others, what did it matter? Gong Yimo simply did not think about it. She would leave those complicated matters to Gong Dai. He obviously knew more about the survival of this era than she did. Gong Yimo was still dizzy when her clothes were stripped off. Seeing that she was about to be eaten, she quickly fought for her own benefits and fiercely told him. "Gong Dai, you must remember that you are this princess's boy toy. You are this princess's private property." Gong Dai was naturally the most gentle at this moment. His eyes were smiling. "Yes, my princess. This little one will serve you now." Gong Yimo's cheeks were red. Thinking of Su Miaolan's words, she said, "Also, you can't look at other women while I'm pregnant. If you really can't hold it in, I can occasionally. Gong Dai pressed her on the desk, like this occasionally. Since it had already come to this point, what else was there to say? Gong Yimo closed her eyes and tried her best to treat this place as a bed. "Come." Gong Dai chuckled and readily covered her. "Yes, my princess." This occasionally lasted until night time. After dinner, Gong Yimo thought that she could rest for a while. Unexpectedly, after washing up, she was carried to the bed by Gong Dai. Gong Yimo expressed that young men who had been abstinent for too long were really scary. Gong Dai expressed that the physical training he had done since he was young was indeed useful. "Don't be afraid, the night was still young." The next day, Gong Yimo was carried to the carriage by Gong Dai. The journey to Yuheng was long and she was still pregnant, so she could not be careless. This horse route was proposed by Gong Yimo in the past. Now that it had officially opened to trade, it crossed 3 countries vertically. Not only was the road smooth, the journey was also shortened by a lot. It would be convenient to go anywhere in the future. Chapter 684. Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with hesitation. Should she fix the cement road? But when she thought about how the main mode of transportation was horses, she dismissed the idea. The journey was very smooth. When they arrived at Yuheng, Gong Yimo couldn't help but sigh at how fast the development was. The entire street was renovated and the clothes of the people were obviously of a higher level. Because Yuheng country was located between Luyi and Daiyu state, if they wanted to be strong, they had to be unique. Therefore, when Gong Yimo was here, she and Kim Yoon explored many ore veins. Not only did they improve their mining techniques, they also improved their smelting techniques. Now, Yuheng's metal exports were the best in the 4 countries. The goods produced were all hard currency and the demand in the other 3 countries could not meet the demand. When they arrived at the capital of Yuheng, Kim Yoon personally came to welcome them. After a year, he finally saw Amour again. Under the tall city gate, Kim Yoon was dressed in a dragon robe, with a jade belt around his waist and a purple gold crown on his head. He was surrounded by hundreds of officials and looked very dignified. His unique good looks were not suppressed by his luxurious attire, instead, it made him look even more exquisite. The cinnabar mole at the corner of his eye added an enchanting charm to his luxurious attire, but it did not make him look feminine. Now, he was only below 1 person and above tens of thousands of people. Every time everyone saw Kim Yoon, they would hate the heavens for being biased and giving all the good fortune to 1 person. Until they saw the regent. To be honest, when these 2 people stood together, it was simply a disaster. Many people ran out of the city to watch. Although they were stopped by the guards from afar, the elegance of these two people was enough to make people admire them even from afar. Gong Dai rarely wore colors other than black. Today, he wore a rare black robe. That soft color diluted the murderous aura that made people not dare to look at him directly and added to his original cold temperament. His facial features were not inferior to Kim Yoon's, not to mention his silver gray hair. Coupled with his clear black eyes, he looked like an immortal. He first got down from the horse and then turned to hold Gong Yimo's hand. Gong Yimo was wrapped in a fur coat and looked very cute. After getting down from the horse, she looked at Kim Yoon and then looked at Gong Dai. When Kim Yoon saw Gong Yimo, he couldn't help but smile. It was clearly winter, but everyone's heart seemed to be filled with flowers. Kim Yoon Gij. Gong Yimo excitedly shouted. When she saw Kim Yoon approaching, she didn't wait for him to speak and shook her head with a sigh. Standing beside the two of you, I feel ashamed. Kim Yoon heard this and his smile became even brighter. He couldn't help but glance at Gong Dai and compare them in his heart. It was undeniable that although their appearances were similar, Gong Dai's cold and majestic aura was like a sharp sword, shocking people. Emoer, are you okay? Kim Yoon retracted his gaze and looked at Gong Yimo with a smile. He knew what happened at Emoer's wedding and that she jumped off a cliff. It was the Dayu State's crown prince who risked his life to save her life. Thinking of this, his expression became even more pitiful. Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied with Kim Yoon's gaze. He took a step forward and pulled Gong Yimo behind him. He coldly said, "Thank you for your concern, Yuheng Kun. This Princess Wangfei is fine." This kind of forceful declaration of sovereignty made Gong Yimo blush a little. However, Kim Yoon slightly raised his eyebrows. Under the golden crown, a pair of watery eyes were mesmerizing. He lightly smiled. If we remember correctly, Emoer hasn't married you yet, right? The failure of the previous wedding had always been a thorn in Gong Dai's heart. He pursed his lips and released a cold aura. Everyone felt that the weather was even colder. She will marry sooner or later. After all, she has this prince's child in her stomach. When he said this, Kim Yoon's eyes darkened. He also knew that Emoer was pregnant. However, he quickly pulled himself together and smiled at Gong Yimo. Emoer, your child is my child. When the time comes, I'll be his godfather, okay? This difference in treatment was too obvious. To Gong Dai, he called himself we, but to Gong Yimo, he called himself I. Gong Yimo blinked and giggled, that's good. It's his honor to have such a beautiful godfather like you. Gong Dai's face darkened. He was still alive. What godfather? However, since the royal sister agreed, Gong Dai couldn't say anything. In any case, he wouldn't bring Emoer to Yuheng if he didn't have anything to do. It's getting late. This Princess Wangfei is tired from the long journey, so I'll go to the post house to rest first. Many thanks to Emperor Yuheng for welcoming me. Kim Yoon smiled gently. How can the post house accommodate people? Knowing that Emoer is coming, we have already tidied up the palace and set up a banquet. Regent, please. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes, feeling dissatisfied in his heart. What was this person thinking? He actually wanted the royal sister to live under his nose. However, Gong Yimo couldn't bear to disobey him and agreed. Big brother Kim Yoon, thank you for your trouble. Then I'll be disrespectful to refuse. Everyone shivered. It had only been a while, but why did the sky become even gloomier? Lo Chi and the others glanced at their prince's dark face and became extremely vigilant. It seemed like they couldn't be careless even if they lived in Yuheng. They would definitely protect the princess with their lives. Just like this, the group smoothly entered the palace. Kim Yoon set up a banquet to welcome them. After not seeing each other for a long time, He felt that there were many things he wanted to say to Immerse. Therefore, at the banquet, Kim Yoon sent the ministers to report to the regent about the riot. Then, he talked to Gong Yimo about other things. Immerse, I heard that you were injured. Are you all better now? Kim Yoon revealed a worried expression. At the time, he had also searched for a long time, but he didn't expect that Gong Dai would find Immerse first. Gong Yimo happily drank a mouthful of wine. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Don't worry, big brother Kim Yoon. My body is great." "That's good." Kim Yoon's heart felt sour. He thought that time could wash away everything, but when he saw Gong Yimo's smiling face again, he could only sigh. Now that the mining industry is doing better and better, and the entire Yuhing's GDP has doubled, all of this is due to your efforts. This toast is to you. Speaking of the past, Gong Yimo also felt a little nostalgic. Back then, she had stayed in Yuhing for 2.5 years. She still had feelings, especially those mines and refineries. They were all built by her and Kim Yoon together. Now that they were reaping good profits, she was very gratified. She raised her wine cup and drank it with Kim Yoon. Gong Dai didn't look over, but the ministers who reported to him were trembling. They all felt that the regent of Dayu State was very imposing. Big brother Kim Yoon, after the improvement of smelting technology, not only can it be used to forge utensils, swords, and furnaces, it can also be used to build bridges, houses, cars, ships, and flour. You can give the information I left you before to the Ministry of Works to grind it. It's best if they can draw inferences from it. She thought of something and added, I've already given the ratio of cement to the Ministry of Works. When combined with steel, we can build the tallest buildings. Chapter 685. Kim Yoon smiled. Then when the time comes, I'll build a stargazing tower and invite you to come and play. Sure. Gong Yimo replied crisply, completely unaware that a certain someone was clenching his cup. The two continued to talk about smelting technology. It wasn't that they hadn't considered the steam engine. Although the principle was simple, the coal mines were still under development. Furthermore, although the smelting technology had improved, it hadn't been popularized yet. Gong Yimo hoped that the four countries would develop and not have a monopoly. Thus, she didn't intend to bring out the steam engine technology yet. She would wait until the improved smelting technology was popularized. Kim Yoon seriously noted down some of Gong Yimo's suggestions and sincerely thanked her. Thank you, Immerse. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what I would be like today. Thinking back, if it wasn't for Gong Yimo's help time and time again, he might have given up, lost his will, and disfigured his face. He would have been exchanged for 1,000 horses by his dead father. How would he have the status and power he had today? He asked himself more than once. If he had expressed his feelings earlier, would he have gotten more? Gong Yimo couldn't help but recall her previous life. His disfigured face and sorrowful appearance for the rest of his life. She couldn't help but laugh. It's all in the past. She narrowed her eyes. Because the hall was warm, she took off her fur coat and wore only a light green cotton dress. Her entire person was as delicate as a newborn willow branch. Kim Yoon couldn't help but stare blankly. How much did he want to have such a delicate and quick-witted wife? Seeing him in a daze, Gong Yimo drank a mouthful of wine and said affirmatively, "Don't think too much. If it wasn't for anything else, even if it was for your face, I would have helped you as a friend. No matter how many times, as long as I'm around, there will be a share for me and a share for you." Who asked you to be my big brother Kim Yoon? Kim Yoon suddenly smiled. Immerse always said that he was beautiful, but she didn't know that in his eyes, she was the most beautiful. Her exquisite face was gentle and sharp, enough to cause the downfall of a city. He held back his greed and said in a low voice, "Then, for this face, I'll give you a toast." Gong Yimo nodded and drank another cup with a smile. The difference was that although Kim Yoon was smiling, his heart was overflowing with bitterness. If she really liked this face so much, could he have used this face to keep this person? On the other side, Gong Dai suddenly changed the shape of the bronze wine cup. The ministers sitting in a circle were terrified. What was the Prince Regent doing? Gong Ju faintly said. My hand slipped. Gong Yimo drank a few more cups and looked at the singing and dancing in the hall. None of them can dance as well as you. Gong Yimo still remembered the dance that Kim Yoon danced when she left. It could be said that it was integrated into his life. If it was in the past, she could still ask Kim Yoon to dance again with a straight face. But now, she was married, and Kim Yoon was also the ruler of a country. She wouldn't mention those unreasonable requests. But when she thought that no one would be able to appreciate that kind of dance, Gong Yimo felt a little regretful. Kim Yoon smiled lightly, and the whole hall was like a blossoming flower. As long as you like it, I'll dance for you, bang. A sound interrupted Kim Yoon's words. The ministers surrounding the Prince Regent wanted to escape. This person was so scary. Could they still communicate properly? Clearly, they were all seriously reporting the situation of the upheaval. Whoa. Kim Yoon saw Gong Dai suddenly stand up and slightly raised his eyebrows. Prince Regent, is the wine and dishes not to your taste? Gong Dai looked at him coldly. When two equally outstanding men looked at each other, there were fierce sparks. Many people present unconsciously swallowed their saliva and didn't dare to speak. The dancing girls panicked and messed up their movements. The music also changed the tune, but no one noticed it. The wine and dishes are okay, but this princess is tired from the journey and needs to rest. Please allow this prince to take her back first. Kim Yoon gritted his teeth. He still had a lot to say. Gong Dai stared back without showing any weakness. That was his wife. There seemed to be smoke floating in the air. Gong Yimo quickly mediated. Speaking of which, I'm a little tired. Kim Yoon gidge, then I'll leave first. Kim Yoon saw that Gong Yimo was tired. Even if he was reluctant, he still swallowed the words of persuasion. Since that's the case, Amour, rest early. Gong Dai's face was ashen as he took Gong Yimo away. His murderous aura was so strong that it was as if he wanted to eat someone. Everyone sighed in their hearts when they thought of the time when these two men fought over the princess. After Gong Yimo left, Kim Yoon didn't have any appetite. The banquet ended early and he went back to rest. His lonely figure made people's hearts ache for him for no reason. The palace servants led the way in front, but they were trembling. The Prince Regent behind them was so scary. Even if he didn't say a word, he was still scary. They really pitied the palace servants of Dai Yu State. With such a Prince Regent, Yuheng was better. His Majesty was so gentle. Gong Yimo's hand was grabbed by Gong Dai and he used a lot of strength. You're hurting me. Gong Yimo couldn't help but say. At this moment, Gong Dai suddenly braked. In the snow, he asked coldly, word by word. Royal sister, don't I look good? Gong Yimo was confused. Gong Dai continued, if you want to see me dance, I can dance for you too. Gong Yimo was embarrassed. Gong Dai was jealous, even if she treated Kim Yoon as her brother. She hesitated for a moment and said to the palace servants in embarrassment, you can all leave. I know how to get to Lingyun Palace. The palace servants were relieved and quickly ran away. Gong Yimo's words made Gong Dai even more jealous. This was Yuheng. Royal sister was so familiar with this place. Didn't it show how close she used to be with Kim Yoon? Royal sister, have you recovered your memory? Gong Dai asked seriously. don't try to lie to me. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. I heard everything you said to Kim Yoon. Her words were clear as if everything was under control. Gong Yimo blinked and didn't know how to answer. His frosty handsome face darkened even more. So many things happened between the two of you. Gong Yimo didn't know if it was an illusion, but she could hear the heartache in his cold voice. She scratched her head and carefully tried to please him. No. I've experienced the most with you and it's the most unforgettable. I only treat Kim Yoon as my brother. Gong Dai's expression softened. He knew that Royal Sister wouldn't think of Kim Yoon, but when he saw Kim Yoon and Royal Sister talking happily and talking about things that he couldn't interrupt, he couldn't help but feel jealous. He really wanted to lock Royal Sister in his body and not let anyone see. Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. She thought that this matter was over, but Gong Dai suddenly asked. If it weren't for me, Royal Sister, would you have married Kim Yoon? Chapter 686. Gong Yimo was stunned. Marry Kim Yoon. Actually, she had thought of this before. If she was 18 years old and really wanted to find someone to marry, it would be best if she could marry Kim Yoon. After all, Kim Yoon was really a good match. However, it was just a thought. It was impossible. Gong Yimo's slightly stunned expression had already revealed her answer. Gong Ju's anger soared to the sky. He couldn't help but clench his teeth and smack Gong Yimo's little buttocks. He told her word by word. Gong Yimo. Let me tell you. No matter how many times you reincarnate, you can only like me. You can only be with me. Gong Yimo was a little innocent. Didn't you just say that if you weren't there? Seeing Gong Dai's handsome face turn gloomy, Gong Yimo snickered. If you were there, what else is there to say? I would only choose you. Gong Dai was strangely appeased. However, he felt that he couldn't let her off just like that. Really? Didn't you think that I'm good-looking and can dance well? That's true. Seeing Gong Dai squinting his eyes, Gong Yimo quickly added, but, you're the most good-looking, and you know how to wield a sword. I like to watch you wield a sword more. Gong Dai's face turned gloomy and he didn't say anything. Gong Yimo took the initiative to tiptoe and kiss him. All right, my vinegar jar, she sighed softly and looked at him attentively. Her voice was extremely gentle. Even if you're disfigured, even if you lose your martial arts, I'll still love you. I'll only love you, okay? Don't be jealous. Gong Dai pursed his lips, but his heart was beating very fast. In the snow, he didn't have any spirit. He was just like an ordinary man in love who also had some strange worries and strange assumptions. However, her kiss could erase everything. I'll only love you. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly and suddenly frowned as he muttered. Every time I think I love you to the extreme, but the more I look at you, the more I love you. Tell me, what should I do? Gong Yimo was delighted to hear that. Of course it's to love him without holding back. I'll love you more and more. Just as the two of them were enjoying their sweet moment, a female voice suddenly interrupted them. This is really the envy of others. Gong Yimo was stunned. She looked up and saw a familiar face. It was Yun Jin. Now that she thought about it, her husband, Wang Jing, was the lord of a city. He could still bring her into the palace. The ministers only needed to pretend that they did not know her. Gong Dai didn't like the way this woman stared at the royal sister. Let's go, royal sister. There's no need to pay attention to irrelevant people. He didn't forget that the royal sister needed to rest. However, Gong Yimo patted his hand and said, it's okay. She's also an old friend of mine. We'll stay in the palace in front. Can you go back and wait for me? Gong Dai frowned. However, Gong Yimo leaned over and kissed him. Her eyes were watery. Okay. Gong Dai's heart softened. He touched her head and said helplessly. As you wish. Based on his investigation, there was no one more powerful than the royal sister in the entire Yuhing palace. Moreover, he had hidden guards by her side, so he wasn't afraid that she would be in danger. Since the royal sister wanted to settle some personal grudges, he wouldn't interfere if she didn't want to. Why are you looking for me? After watching Gong Dai leave, Gong Yimo went straight to the point and asked. Back then, she pitied Yun Jin's innocence and helped her time and time again. However, she didn't know that human nature was complicated. She didn't know when she started to be jealous of her. In the end, she even attacked her. Therefore, Gong Yimo didn't have a good impression of Yun Jin. Yun Jin heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Gong Dai leave. She instinctively felt that the man was stubborn and difficult to deal with. It would be easier to talk to him if Gong Yimo was around. I want you to help me regain the position of Empress Dowager. Gong Yimo thought that she had misheard. She smiled and said, That's strange. Why are you looking for me? Moreover, why should I help you? Yun Jin relaxed when she saw that there was no one around. Her charming face was full of resentment as she said plaintively. Yun will only listen to you. That's why I'm looking for you. If you're willing to help me, I'll give you 10% of the profits from Yuhing's Golden Jade Bank. I know that you have 10% in your hands. If you take my 10%, you'll have 20% of the profits. Is this deal worth it, princess? Speaking of which, Kim Yun really treated Yun Jin well. Although she was removed from the position of Empress Dowager, he was afraid that she would feel wronged. He actually gave her 10% of the profits from the Golden Jade Bank. This amount of profit was enough to make her husband, who already owned a city, green with envy. No, it should be said that no one wouldn't be jealous of this 10% of the profits. If it wasn't for the fact that she had no other choice, Yun Jin wouldn't have thought of using this to make a deal with Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo's pupils shrank slightly. Then, she smiled faintly and said, Do you know how much 10% of the profits is? Yun Jin didn't know, but every time she went to the bank to withdraw money, it was as if she could get an endless amount of money. Gong Yimo sneered and asked, You know that I have 20% of the profits. If I want to do something, if I have any bad intentions, how dangerous would Kim Yun be? In the snow, perhaps because Gong Yimo's expression was too serious, Yun Jin actually felt a little guilty. Why would you have any bad intentions towards Yun? She had seen all those things in the past. Gong Yimo had helped Yun without any reservation. She had even considered the development of Yun after she inherited the throne. Yuhing had the smallest land area among the 4 countries. Whether it was the development of agriculture or animal husbandry, it couldn't compare to the other countries. In order to not fall behind in the future, she had been busy every day during the 2.5 years in Yuhing. She had dug a river channel and opened a mine. She had directly opened a new development path for Yuhing, and it had an industry that was ahead of the other 3 countries. These were all things that Yun had told her later. Since Gong Yimo had done so much for Yun, then what did it matter if she had 10% or 20% of the profits from the Yuhing Bank in her hands? Gong Yimo had a headache and held her forehead. Kim Yun had such a mother who didn't know what was important and what was important. She didn't know how unlucky Kim Yun was. A person's heart can change, Your Highness. Just like how I didn't expect that a cowardly person like you would bite back at me one day. Yun Jin's expression instantly turned ugly. Seeing that she was Kim Yun's mother, Gong Yimo sighed and said, If you still have the least bit of self-awareness as a mother, then don't mention this today. I'm sure that Kim Yun Gij won't allow you to speak of this matter. No matter who gets the 10% of profits in your hands, it's a very dangerous matter for Yuhing. If you don't want to spend your life in war, then it's best to rot in your stomach. Seeing that Gong Yimo had turned to leave, Yunjin had no choice but to start sobbing. But other than you, no one can help me. You don't know how overboard Wang Jing is. After he got an official position, he changed. It's not enough that he married me, he even took a concubine. My poor child was just born not long ago. Chapter 687. Gong Yimo thought of the ordinary-looking Wang Jing and said coldly, "You're Kim Yoon's birth mother. Wang Jing wouldn't dare to take a concubine. The only possibility is that you've touched his bottom line. For example, you want to find a boy toy." Gong Yimo looked at her with amusement as her face turned paler. "Yunjin, you're no longer the Empress Dowager, and he's no longer a boy toy. You don't have any power in your hands. How can you still have such naive thoughts? Do you think you can do whatever you want after getting married?" Seeing that Gong Yimo guessed it so easily, Yunjin understood everything. "Sure enough, you're the one who set me up. You've already guessed the outcome, but you still dug a hole for me to jump into. How can you be so vicious?" Yunjin's face gradually became distorted as she looked at Gong Yimo with hatred. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. "If you say I'm vicious, then I'm vicious. Anyway, no matter what I do, you won't think of me as a good person. Why should I meddle in other people's business?" If Yunjin didn't do anything and just stayed by Wang Jing and their child's side, how could Wang Jing dare to disrespect her? He was just asking for it. She turned around, and Yunjin's indignant voice came from behind her again. "Gong Yimo. You're really not going to help me. You owe me this. You should return it to me." Gong Yimo waved her hand with her back facing her. Her fur coat and snow blended into one. Even though she was pregnant, she was still carefree. "If you're sick, you can't stop taking medicine." Seeing that Gong Yimo wasn't moved by the benefits, Yunjin really had no other choice. She stomped her foot and said faintly, "You forced me to do this. Gong Yimo. You'll regret it." The next morning, Gong Dai and Gong Yimo went to Yuhing's dungeon to see the rioters who were being controlled by Kim Yoon. These people's eyes were lifeless. Their condition was even worse than Xue Wuxi's. Xue Wuxi still had moments of clarity, but these people were like wandering ghosts without orders, walking back and forth in the prison. Because they were all ordinary civilians, they couldn't break the iron cage. Gong Emo observed for a while and said to Gong Ju, "I don't know what Xue Qianzhong is doing. It seems like he's changing the poison and making it more violent." Gong Dai saw her worry and comforted her softly, "It's okay, we still have Stone Heart. Plus, the 4 countries are killing the remnants of the Snow Clan. They can't go to your mother's place, and there's no place for them to stay. They won't be able to do much. Something's not right." Gong Yimo suddenly said, "Snow clearly knows that I have Stone Heart, and my orders are higher than his, so how could he still spread poison? The only possibility is that they found a way to restrain Stoneheart. He can nullify Stoneheart's orders." When Gong Yi heard this, he also felt that it was inappropriate and ordered someone to bring Monkey over. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try. So, in the dungeon, Gong Dai stuffed the holy stone into Monkey's mouth. Monkey cried out uncomfortably and closed its eyes. Gong Dai let Gong Yimo out because she would feel uncomfortable if she heard Monkey's cry. Gong Yimo gave him Stoneheart and walked out obediently. She felt uneasy. Gong Dai pinched Stoneheart and calmed down, gathering all his willpower in his hand. "Manic." As soon as his voice fell, Monkey shrieked. But strangely, the people in the dungeon didn't feel anything. They continued to wander around, their eyes were dim red, as if they couldn't hear anything. Gong Dai's expression was solemn. He used the string that tied the holy stone and pulled the stone out of Monkey's throat. Although it was uncomfortable this time, it didn't hurt. So Monkey obediently didn't resist. On the other hand, Gong Dai remained silent. After telling Gong Yimo the conclusion, Gong Yimo's expression changed and she became extremely worried. What should we do? It seems that the other party has already grasped the technique of using the holy stone and changed the nature of the poison. If that's the case, we're too passive. Gong Dai saw her ugly expression and comforted her. Don't worry too much, royal sister. How can I not worry? Gong Yimo shook her head and sighed. These people are obviously ordinary people. They suffered an undeserved calamity for no reason. Moreover, there's no antidote for the poison. In the end, won't many people lose their lives for nothing? Gong Dai muttered, if there's poison, there must be an antidote. I've been sending people to find something that can counter the holy stone. Don't worry too much. It'll be fine. Gong Yimo's brows relaxed slightly. We have to catch snow and the rest as soon as possible. As for the rest, we can only ask those who know medicine. At this moment, Kim Yoon suddenly rushed over. Not good, there's another riot. This time, the location is very close. It's in a village near the capital city. What should we do? Gong Yimo made a prompt decision. How about this, brother Kim Yoon, lend me some troops and then you guard the capital city. Gong Dai, leave a group of elites here to protect brother Kim Yoon. Let's go take a look. Gong Dai naturally wouldn't object to his wife's words. He asked Lo Chi to leave behind a group of 100 elites. They didn't bring many people, only 1,000, but all of them were experts. Then I'll leave it to you. Kim Yoon was very worried. This kind of sudden riot had caused everyone to panic. He hoped that it could be resolved as soon as possible. Without further ado, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai immediately set off. They borrowed 3,000 men from Kim Yoon and brought 500 of their own elites to the small village. When they arrived, the sight of blood and corpses made Gong Yimo suddenly want to vomit. This was something that had never happened before. Perhaps it was because of her pregnancy, her senses had become extremely sensitive. The smell of blood was so strong that it was pungent. Seeing her like this, Gong Dai was worried and brought her to the mountain to rest. He asked Lo Chi to bring people in to search for survivors. The villagers who had narrowly escaped death saw that their hometown had become a graveyard in a short time. They couldn't help but kneel on the ground and cry. Gong Yimo heard this and lamented in her heart. She looked up and saw the whole village from the hillside. But now it seemed that there were no survivors. Lo Chi was quickly rescued. He looked dignified and reported to Gong Dai. Reporting to Your Highness, Your Highness. Most of the people in the village have been captured. But some of the old and weak died tragically in the village. Their corpses are incomplete, as if they were bitten. Hearing Lo Chi's answer, Gong Yimo only felt her stomach churning again. Gong Dai hugged her with heartache. What else did you find? Lo Chi said, there should be about 500 of them. Looking at the footprints, they have gone into the mountain. But there are many mines there. It's difficult to find these 500 people. Luo Xiaoqi said with some confusion, after all, the poisoned people are still human. Why would they eat the corpses of the old and weak? Could it be that they have become monsters? Gong Yimo analyzed with a pale face. It's very likely that the new poison suppressed their intelligence and then deprived them of food. They obeyed the order to kidnap some young and strong people. But because they were too hungry, they cruelly killed the old and weak. Their nature drove them to eat human flesh. She couldn't think about it. If she did, she would vomit again. Chapter 688. In that case, the parasite didn't turn them into beasts, but the culprit deliberately turned them into monsters. Lo Chi was a little apprehensive. No matter what, we have to find them as soon as possible. Gong Dai nodded and ordered, take some people and follow the footprints. They're here, so they can't have gone far. Also, send some people to the other remote villages to take a look. This prince has a feeling that this isn't the only place that suffered. They need people, or else they'll commit another crime. Gong Yimo nodded. The culprit probably wants to gather people to attack Yuhing's capital and take control of Yuhing. Then, they'll use Yuhing as a base to attack Daiyu State and Lu Yi. In that case, Big Brother Kim Yoon is in a very dangerous situation. It'll be fine, I'm here. Knowing that Gong Yimo was worried about Kim Yoon, Gong Dai thought of a countermeasure. It would be best if they could solve the problem once and for all. After Gong Yimo and Gong Dai returned, Kim Yoon was also a little worried after hearing what they said. At this time, the people that Gong Dai sent out also returned to report that 2 small villages near the capital had indeed been massacred. Similarly, the old and weak had died tragically, and the strong had been taken away. As the villages were too remote and no one had escaped, only now did they know that the corpses were all smelly. Gong Yimo felt a sense of crisis. In that case, the culprit might have more than 500 people. Including those who were taken away, there are at least 2,000 of them now. This was really impossible to guard against. The culprit only needed to bring the parasite and holy stone to sneak into a village to poison it. The next day, these people would all be his subordinates. Moreover, the modified parasite made people lose their humanity. They were not like Shui Wuxi, who would erupt regularly without provocation. Instead, they were in a state of madness at all times. It was as if they would tear apart the people around them with a single command. Gong Yimo couldn't help but ask, Big Brother Kim Yoon, how many people are stationed in the capital now? Kim Yoon said, 30,000 people. Gong Yimo frowned. We don't know how many more goo poison they have. If we wait for them to counterattack, I'm afraid that 30,000 people won't be enough, and the difficult part was that these people were Yuhing's people. Kim Yoon definitely didn't want to kill them, but save them. But Gong Yimo hadn't found the antidote yet. If it's possible, please invite Divine Dr. Lu and Si Wuyan over to Yuhing. In terms of medicine and poison, no one is more proficient than them. Kim Yoon nodded his head and hurriedly sent a letter to Si Wuyan while Gong Dai also wrote a letter to Divine Dr. Lu, requesting for his help. After Kim Yoon left, Gong Yimo laid in Gong Dai's arms and voiced her concerns. Gong Dai, I keep feeling that someone is helping the Snow Clan. Changing the medicinal properties of the goo poison is something that most people wouldn't be able to do, but there was one person who could. Gong Dai suddenly said. Gong Yimo also thought of that possibility. Dong Wani. Is that possible? She is involved in this matter. Nothing is impossible. If that woman wants to make a comeback, this is a chance. Gong Dai's words made Gong Yimo's heart turn cold. That's right. Lu Yi. I wonder how Dragon City's Wuji is doing. Gong Dai said, I wrote a letter to him previously, emphasizing on the terrifying medicinal properties of the goo poison and asked him to secretly monitor the people at the sacred lake. Currently, I haven't heard of anything happening at his side. Gong Yimo sighed, I keep feeling uneasy in my heart. Moreover, we can't just sit here and wait for death. Waiting here for others to come and fight is not Gong Yimo's style. If they really fight, she has a weapon in her hands. No matter how many people there are, she is not afraid. But what she wants is not to kill, but to protect the lives of those innocent people. I have an idea. Gong Emo suddenly had a flash of inspiration and had an idea. The winter night is cold and quiet. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai brought a few people and walked towards the mountain. Lo Chi was carrying a tied-up person on his back. When they reached the place, Gong Yimo released him and he immediately let out a muffled roar. Gong Dai was carrying a monkey in his hand. Gong Dai looked at monkey and smiled deeply, causing it to instantly explode. But it did not dare to escape. Then it heard Gong Dai's cold voice. Eat it. Monkey knew that this person wanted it to eat the holy stone on its neck. Even if it was unwilling, Monkey still swallowed the stone. It was stuck in the pouch by its throat, making it extremely uncomfortable. What they had to do next was to wait. In order not to affect Gong Yimo had already walked far away. This plan was very simple. Even if they changed the goo poison and made it impossible for them to control the other party, the holy stones were still connected. If the people hiding in the mountain used the holy stone to issue a command, the monkey would be able to receive it. Once it made a sound, the poisoned person who was dragged out from the dungeon would act according to the command and the sound. Then they would be able to find where those people were hiding. It was snowing tonight. If the other party wanted to take action, they would definitely not miss this opportunity. Gong Dai carried Gong Yimo and dodged. Hearing the monkey's cries would cause Gong Yimo to have a headache. Gong Dai could not bear to do so, so he only left Lo Chi there to watch. Finally, when the moon was high in the sky, the monkey suddenly made a short cry. The moment it made a sound, the poisoned person who was tied up suddenly stopped moving. Lo Chi's mind was like lightning. He immediately let go of him. The poisoned person stood up. His red eyes were lifeless as he looked in a certain direction. At this moment, the monkey issued a series of commands. That meant that the mastermind was about to take action. Seeing the poisoned person suddenly rush in a direction, Lo Chi and the rest quickly followed. Gong Dai chased far behind with Gong Yimo. He held Gong Yimo in his arms. His qigong was elegant and his internal energy materialized, blocking all the wind and snow. Gong Yimo felt very safe in his arms. And this direction was actually the gathering place of the larger villages near the capital. It seemed that after those small villages were guarded, they did not dare to approach them. Instead, they directly attacked the larger villages. Gong Yimo suddenly asked Gong Dai, "How do you think they made the stone heart ineffective?" Gong Dai guessed, "I think they must have found a more accurate way to control it." Oh. Kim Yoon said that these rioters are very organized. "We have experimented before with the holy stone. It can make the poisoned person hallucinate through animal cries and achieve the desired effect. However, hallucinations do not make a group of people organized. The only possibility is that they have improved the way to control the poisoned person. They have made the transmission method more complicated and accurate. So even if we have the holy stone, it will be useless if we don't know their transmission method." It was like wanting to call someone but not knowing the number. Holding the phone was useless. Gong Yimo felt a little aggrieved. She thought to herself that she had to quickly crack the other party's transmission method and stop this catastrophe. Chapter 689. The few of them followed the poisoned person who was being controlled. They circled around a mountain and arrived at a village behind the mountain. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo both had a feeling that this person was very familiar with the surroundings of Yuheng's capital city. It was not easy for him to find a hidden village behind the mountain in such an area with so many villages. Fortunately, Gong Yimo's group was close to the village, and the other party was still on the way. Seeing that the poisoned person was about to kill his way into the village, Lo Chi knocked him out and tied up Monkey's mouth. Only then did Gong Dai appear with Gong Yimo in his arms. Looking at the peaceful village in front of him, he thought of a plan. "Lo Chi, take this king's token and go borrow 10,000 soldiers from the Yuheng emperor." "Yes." Lo Chi hurriedly went, but Gong Yimo said, "Do we need so many people?" Gong Dai nodded, "There are other villages nearby here. If the other party does not want to alarm others, it is very likely that they will turn out in full force. Let's end this quickly." "That makes sense." Gong Yimo hugged Gong Dai's neck. "What do we do later?" Gong Dai stroked her hair. "We don't know how the other party is controlling the puppets. Don't get involved, or you'll get a headache when you hear those sounds." Gong Yimo nodded. What he said was true. Although she had suppressed the poison for some reason, what if it accidentally broke out again? "Be careful, I feel that they are coming." Gong Dai placed her on a tree far away and kissed her gently. "They are already here, but it's okay." Gong Yimo's heart instantly calmed down. She hugged Gong Dai's head and rubbed it, "Then come back soon. If there's anything, you must call me immediately." Because he did not bring any hidden guards, Gong Dai was worried and reminded her. However, at such a long distance, as long as Gong Yimo called, he would definitely rush over immediately. Well, don't kill too many people. Just find the mastermind. After all, they are Yuheng's citizens. Gong Dai gave her a reassuring look and turned to leave. Not long after he left, Gong Yimo vaguely saw a large number of people appear at the entrance of the village. Luo Xiaoqi and the others quickly went to wake up the villagers, while Gong Dai stood at the door with a narrow sword. The falling snow was silent. He was just standing there leisurely, but he had the aura of a man holding back 10,000 men. Although those poisoned were ordinary people, under his control, each and every one of them had extraordinary strength and were not afraid of death. Seeing that someone was trying to stop them, they rushed forward without thinking. Gong Dai had not personally fought for a long time. Looking at them, he was actually a little eager to give it a try. However, he remembered Gong Yimo's words. He would not kill them, but only knock them out. However, there were too many of them. There were actually 2,000 of them, and none of them had any skills. It would take some time to knock them all out. Gong Yimo's heart was slightly relieved. With Gong Dai here, no matter how many people there were, it was impossible for them to rush into the village. At this time, a ghostly figure appeared under the tree. Gong Yimo was stunned. When she saw the person, she said with some uncertainty, "You are Jin Zhou." He was Kim Yoon's brother, the eldest prince of Yuheng. At that time, he failed to harm Kim Yoon and was schemed against by Gong Yimo. In the end, he was sent to Luyi. It was unknown whether he was alive or dead. How could he appear here? Jin Zhou was not like him. In the past, he was only a showy and impractical eldest prince. But now, his whole body was covered with blue veins. His expression was cold and ferocious, like an evil spirit. "It's rare that the princess still remembers me." His voice was rough and extremely unpleasant, making Gong Yimo frown slightly. "Princess, you must not call people." He raised his head and smiled mysteriously, "Otherwise, my people will tear the entire village into pieces." Gong Yimo could not help but laugh. "To deal with you, I don't need my husband to make a move. I alone am enough." "Is that so?" Jin Zhou smiled maliciously. "I don't know if the princess cares about Kim Yoon's little life." Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows. "Kim Yoon Gij has tens of thousands of people protecting him. Do you think I will be fooled by you?" Jin Zhou smiled gently. "If everyone in the world was like the princess, there would be nothing for us to do. But fortunately, there are many stupid people in the world." Gong Yimo's heart suddenly flashed with a bad feeling. Yunjin. Impossible, it's so late. What is Yunjin doing in the palace? But it's not impossible. For example, when she heard the order to mobilize the troops, she entered the palace because she was worried about the emperor. Her husband will not stop her. And Kim Yoon is not guarded against Yoonjin. She can't be that stupid. Gong Yimo thought that Yoonjin is Kim Yoon's mother. Would she do something to her own child? She won't, but... What if someone told her that as long as Kim Yoon takes the medicine, not only will he not die, but he will also listen to her and obey her? Gong Yimo's expression slightly sank. Jin Zhou smiled again. That woman is spoiled by Kim Yoon. She has long been insatiable. In order to become the glorious Empress Dowager again, do you think she will be obedient and send the child of the same heart goo into Kim Yoon's body? Same heart goo. Gong Yimo seemed to have caught some inspiration. You can accurately control these poison people because you added the same heart goo on top of the goo poison. She has heard of this kind of goo before. It's extremely rare. Usually, it's used between a man and a woman. One party wants to keep the other party and control the other party. Jin Zhou sneered, it seems that I can't tell you too much. The princess's intelligence is really scary. Back to the topic, you have two choices now. 1. Follow me. 2. Kim Yoon becomes our puppet. Gong Yimo blinked, follow you so that you can threaten my husband. Jin Yoon will become your puppet so that you scurrying rats can have a place to settle down. I don't want to choose either. After Gong Yimo finished speaking, she suddenly jumped down from the tree. At this moment, many people hiding in the dark appeared in front of Gong Yimo. Jin Zhou did not think that she would dare to make a move at this time and angrily said, don't tell me you really don't care about Kim Yoon's life. He treated you with sincerity in vain. Gong Yimo shuttled back and forth between the killers. These people were also controlled. One by one, their murderous aura soared. But after fighting, Gong Yimo felt that these people could not hurt her. Instead, she must kill Jin Zhou. If I go with you, will you let go of Kim Yoon Gij? Sorry, I've never been lucky with bad people. Gong Yimo's words made Jin Zhou's face change. His face became more ferocious. Then I can only take the princess away by force. Princess, don't ask for help. Otherwise, the people in the village will die. After Jin Zhou finished speaking, more than a dozen people suddenly emerged from the dark. This was a bit tricky. These people were all under Gong Yimo's control. If Gong Yimo really wanted to kill them, she couldn't bear it. The matter of the Snow Clan, after all, she felt that it was her responsibility. If fewer people died, she would feel more at ease. Chapter 690. Jin Zhou originally thought that victory was in his grasp, but he saw that Gong Yimo was actually so powerful. Under the siege of dozens of people, he still had the strength to fight. If this dragged on, what would he do if the regent was alerted? As a last resort, his eyes turned red and he let out a sharp whistle from his mouth. At that moment, the strength of all the assassins soared. Gong Yimo felt a piercing pain in her head. But before the pain, she was still shocked. How could Jin Zhou also use the holy stone to make a sound? Because of a moment of carelessness, Gong Yimo covered her head and screamed. She was caught by the other party. Jin Zhou was overjoyed. As he continued to disturb her, he ordered people to restrain her and then take her away. Poor Gong Yimo's head was about to explode, but she still held up her sword to resist. She gritted her teeth and decided to break out of the encirclement and escape first. But in the next second, a gust of wind blew and Jin Zhou flew out and hit a stone. He spat out blood. He struggled to get up and looked at Gong Dai. His eyes were filled with hatred. Regent. How awe-inspiring. He clenched his teeth and watched as Gong Ju defeated all of his men like a hot knife through butter. Gong Ju then held Gong Emo in his arms. He was so close to succeeding. But in order to save your woman, you sacrificed the entire village. How cruel. As he spoke, there were flames everywhere. Without Gong Dai's obstruction, the rest of the people rushed in crazily, shouting non-stop. The disturbance disappeared. Gong Yimo rubbed her head and looked at Gong Dai worriedly. Gong Dai comforted her, "It's okay." Little Seven woke up the villagers and took them away. Jin Zhou gritted his teeth, "Then you can't kill me. I have the mother parasite in my body. If you kill me, those 2,000 people will be buried with me." Gong Yimo heard this and smiled coldly. Heart parasite is a parasite that binds two people together. But you can control so many people under the effect of the parasite. It's already beyond the scope of the parasite. If you die, they will die too. I don't believe it. Jin Zhou's face paled. You'll know once you try. Poor Kim Yoon treated you so sincerely, but you didn't show any mercy when you slaughtered his people. Gong Yimo suddenly reached out and sucked in a sword behind Jin Zhou. On the way, the sword pierced through Jin Zhou's chest. Holding the bloody sword, Gong Yimo smiled. Let's give it a try then. I'll naturally satisfy your request. Jin Zhou looked at his chest in disbelief and spat out blood. Aren't you afraid that they will really die? In his opinion, Gong Yimo was definitely not someone who would kill the innocent. Gong Yimo looked at him kneeling on the ground and said faintly, rather than keeping you alive and letting you control those potential people to do bad things, it's better to let them all die. However, I believe in my judgment. You can't control the life and death of so many people. Her expression was firm. Firstly, she believed in herself. Secondly, when it was time to make a choice, she would be more ruthless than anyone. After Jin Zhou died, those rioting people suddenly calmed down and wandered around, looking for food like crazy. Gong Yimo asked Gong Dai to put her down. Then she waved her sword and cut Jin Zhou's throat. Sure enough, at his throat, there was a hard thing. What did Shui Qianzhong and the rest do to make people not fall unconscious after eating the holy stone? Moreover, they could use the holy stone to make sounds. It was like turning people into animals. At this time, the army arrived. Gong Yimo said to Gong Dai, "You stay here and bring those poison people back. Also, this person's corpse needs to be studied. I'll go first." Gong Dai frowned. "Where are you going?" "I'll go with you." Gong Yimo shook her head. "Although those poison people are out of control, it will take a lot of effort to catch them. Time is of the essence. It's best if you stay and suppress them. Also, Kim Yoon-gij is in danger. I have to hurry back." Gong Dai was worried. "If you meet someone who can disturb you again, what will you do?" "Royal sister, I won't allow you to fall into any danger." Gong Yimo was anxious, but Gong Dai was afraid. If he didn't come late, wouldn't Royal sister be taken away by these people? Gong Yimo saw his worry and sighed. She went up and hugged his neck and kissed him. In the wind and snow, the two of them were entangled. "Don't worry, I'm not a canary. We should face these storms together." Gong Yi's jade-like eyes dimmed slightly. "Then you have to promise me that no matter what happens, you can't leave me behind. You have to live well." Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. Gong Dai was almost intoxicated by her smile. "Don't worry, I have you and a child. I really can't bear to die. Even if I have to stand against the world, even if blood will flow like a river, I will still live. I won't let you be alone again." Gong Dai then lowered his head and kissed her, sighing. "I can't do anything about you." Gong Yimo smiled mischievously. "Then I'll be going. See you at the palace later." Seeing Gong Yimo walk away, Gong Dai's whole body emitted a cold aura. These people really don't know when to stop. He just wanted to live a good life with royal sister, hand in hand. He didn't want to solve one troublesome matter after another here. Gong Dai quickly led the army back and quickly controlled all the poison people. This time, the palace's dungeon should be full, right? Gong Yimo's Qin Gong leaped. She was burning with anxiety. If Kim Yoon really took the same heart goo, who would control him? Snow Chinjong. No way. She couldn't let Yuheng become a battlefield, a stronghold for those disgusting people. Kim Yoon Gij. Nothing must happen to you. Yoon Jin looked at the pill in her hand with some hesitation. She did not know that the same heart goo only had one mother goo and one child goo. She only knew that the other party had given her a mother goo and two child goo. At that time, she had used one of them as an experiment and found that that person was actually very obedient. When she did not order him, everything was normal. However, when she ordered him, he would come and go as he pleased. She was a little hesitant about the remaining child goo. Should she give it to Yoon or give it to Wang Jing? Actually, giving it to Wang Jing wasn't a bad idea. He would allow her to indulge and live however she wanted. But once she thought of Gong Yimo's proud face and her son being bewitched by her, obeying Gong Yimo's words, she felt uncomfortable. If her son took the child goo and listened to her, ignoring Gong Yimo. Thinking of this, Yoon Jin suddenly felt a little agitated. Then, she made up her mind. She didn't know that the mother goo of the poison in her hand was in someone else's body. It was late at night, but the palace was still brightly lit. There was no choice. They had just sent 10,000 people to suppress the riot. The emperor couldn't sleep and waited for news. The palace servants could only wait with him. Chapter 691. When Wang Jing heard that Yoon Jin was concerned about His Majesty and wanted to see him, even if it was inconvenient late at night, he immediately got up and prepared the carriage. He was still very happy to do this kind of thing that could show his loyalty to the emperor, so he sent Yoon Jin to the palace that very night. After entering the palace, Yoon Jin did not delay and went straight to the main hall. Kim Yoon was a little surprised to see Yoon Jin come to see him. Since she wanted to be the Empress Dowager again and he refused, Yoon Jin had been very cold to him. Now she even thought of caring about him. Kim Yoon was a little touched and secretly wondered if he had said too much before. As soon as the door opened, the cold air outside swept in, making Kim Yoon a little cold. He looked up and saw Yoon Jin standing alone in front of the door with a pale face. In such bad weather, his mother still came to see him. Kim Yoon smiled, and his eyes became more and more gentle. "Mother, I'm fine. It's so late at night. I've troubled you to come again." When Yoon Jin saw that her son was kind to her and not as cold as before, the guilt in her heart couldn't help but increase. She tightened the food box in her hand and forced a smile. When you have something on your mind, you can't eat. Now I don't know how long it will take for them to come back. I personally cooked some food. Try it to fill your stomach. Kim Yoon was slightly stunned because Yoon Jin hadn't cooked for a long time. Did she come this time to admit defeat and repair the relationship between mother and son? Kim Yoon naturally followed good advice. What did mother make? He hadn't eaten Yoon Jin's food for a long time because now she didn't need to do it herself, and she was also afraid of hurting her soft hands. Yoon Jin approached step by step and opened the food box. There was a small bowl inside. As soon as it was opened, the beautiful plum blossom soup appeared in front of Kim Yoon. His eyes darkened. How should he put it? His mother couldn't make such a delicious meal. Her culinary skills were probably not as good as his. But thinking that it was Yoon Jin's kind intentions, Kim Yoon didn't expose her and took out the food bowl. Plum blossom soup on a snowy night, it really has a special meaning. Mother, let's try it together. No. Yoon-jin was shocked and replied subconsciously. Then, she felt that she had answered too quickly, so she quickly said, I don't eat at night. I have to maintain my posture. Don't you know that? Kim Yoon was thinking the same thing, so he didn't force it. Yoon-jin watched as he poured the plum blossom soup into a small bowl. She was in a dilemma. On one hand, he couldn't bear to poison his son. Even if it didn't cause any harm to his body and he could still deal with government affairs as usual, it wouldn't affect him. However, poison was poison, but when she thought of how biased her son was towards Gong Yimou and how obedient her son was to her before he met Gong Yimou, her heart hardened again. She didn't say anything to stop him. So be it. She didn't want much. She just wanted Yoon to stay away from Gong Yimou in the future. She would stand her ground against all opposition and let her regain her status as the Empress Dowager. She definitely wouldn't force her son to do anything overboard. Kim Yoon looked at the plum blossom soup in front of him and thought that Mo loved sweets the most. When she came back, perhaps he could let her try it. So he suddenly stopped moving. Mother, Shin will use this later. It's getting late. You should go back and rest first. When he said this, his tone became even gentler. Shen is fine. Everything is fine. However, Yoon-jin was a bit anxious. It's mother's good intentions. I'll watch you drink it before leaving. This is the best plum blossom soup and bird's nest. It's hard to get even with money. Kim Yoon said a bit embarrassedly, Mo, will be back soon. She's busy working for Yuheng. Jin will share it with her later. After all, the chef in Yoon-jin's residence was the best in all of Yuheng. The ingredients used were also the finest in Yuheng. It could be seen how much he cared for Yoon-jin. Yoon-jin's face suddenly fell. Mo, you only have Gong Yimou in your eyes. You don't care about me, your mother. She wanted to say more, but then she thought that as long as Kim Yoon ate it, he wouldn't side with Gong Yimou in the future. Why should she get angry at this time and cause some unhappiness? As expected, Kim Yoon also frowned. Mother. Mo is very good. Why are you always picking on her? Yoon-jin suppressed her anger and said unconcernedly, all right, don't worry about her. She has the regent to take care of her. You don't have to worry about her. Seeing Kim Yoon's eyes darken, she was secretly delighted. Drink it quickly. Mother will watch you drink it and then leave. Kim Yoon sighed and finally didn't say anything. The plum blossom soup in front of him was clear and bright. Mo was the least resistant to this kind of beautiful food. As he stirred the soup with a spoon, he couldn't help but think of the time when Mo was still around. Every time he ate with her, she would always say a lot of interesting things. Time would also pass very quickly. Many times, they would sit around the mountain together and eat salted vegetables and steamed buns. The dignified princess would sit on the ground in coarse clothes. Her small white face would be stained, but it made her eyes as bright and dazzling as the stars. She didn't have the rule of not talking when eating or sleeping. When she chatted, her words were also unrestrained and unfocused. However, when he ate with her like this, the simple tea and plain tea would also be exceptionally sweet. But now, even if he ate extravagantly, he couldn't experience the happiness of the past. He could no longer enjoy her beauty unscrupulously because someone had forcefully taken her away and kept her as a treasure. Kim Yoon held the bowl and sighed inwardly. He was about to drink it in one gulp, but Yoon-jin, who was beside him, almost held her breath. Bang! The porcelain bowl broke and the soup splashed all over her. Who? Yoon-jin was the first to jump up. However, Kim Yoon's secret guards didn't come out to stop her, because the person who came was their emperor's most cherished person. The door was kicked open. Gong Yimo held the door and gasped for breath while holding her stomach. The thing that shot out just now was a pearl from her hairpin. They finally made it in time. Kim Yoon didn't have time to care about the mess on his body. When he saw Gong Yimo rushing back, he quickly went up to her. "Mo, what's wrong? Why are you so anxious? Did something happen?" Gong Yimo gasped for breath and looked at Kim Yoon. She grinned. "What can happen to me? You're the one who's in trouble, old brother." Kim Yoon then remembered that Gong Yimo broke his bowl, but that bowl was personally served to him by his mother. Could there be a problem? When Kim Yoon looked over, Yoon Jin shrieked as if she had been pricked by a needle. "You're slandering me," she thought to herself. This kind of poison couldn't be detected. She would be fine even if she insisted. Could Gong Yimo do anything to her? "You're saying that I've wronged you." Gong Yimo finally calmed her breath and walked in step by step. She still had the chill of the wind and snow on her body. Once she entered, the warmth made her rub her face, as if she had come back to life. She glanced sideways at Yoon Jin and pointed at the remaining plum blossom soup. "The same heart gu only has one mother and one child. Even if Kim Yoon drank it, he wouldn't listen to you. Do you still want him to drink it?" You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.